president of the Heritage Foundation and Heritage Action for America.
Thanks. Thanks so much. You're very kind. It's wonderful to welcome you here. We always have a lot going on at Heritage, which is not a complaint. It's a real privilege to do what we do. And just like 2 hours ago, if that, in this very room, we were hosting our annual Constitution Day event, discussing the release of our third in a series of Constitution handbooks. Lawyers, legal scholars, judges, former members of state Supreme Courts. And that is really important. I can't really exaggerate how important that is for obvious reasons to a group of Americans. But I have to say, with all due respect to my colleagues in the Meese Legal Center and the 900 contributors to that project, this conversation is even more important. It's even more important. Because the reason the Constitution is so vital for us is because it provides the architecture by which humans, if given full freedom and self-governance, can flourish. And that's the proper way to understand one aspect of the conversation that we are commencing today. My passion also comes from this being my academic area of specialization. I was a young graduate student at Virginia Tech, thinking that I would write military history as so many people did at the time, and that's good. And then, as happens in graduate school, my eyes were opened when I took a history class on family history. And it was in that class, in the very first week, the professor who became my thesis advisor had us read the Moynihan report. And my life was changed. Because for me, my personal interest, growing up in a working class family, going to the largest public high school in Louisiana, split pretty evenly between white students and black students, merged with the academic interest that the great scholar and eventual senator and one of the great statesmen in modern American history, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, told us, which is public policy can, in fact, affect culture. And it can do so positively, it can do so negatively. And in this case, it's doing it negatively. And what we have seen, if you think about Moynihan's caution of a 25% unmarried birth rate among black women then, is a 40% unmarried birth rate across all ethnic and racial groups in the United States today, is that his warnings were prescient, not just for African American women, but for all of us. And so 3 years ago, when serendipity, or as I like to call it, the Holy Spirit, introduced me to Delano Squires, and he came into Heritage, and we had one conversation, and I offered him a job on the spot. We pledged in that moment that we were going to have this event. And not just an event, but that we were going to join forces with anyone of any political tribe, of any background, any religion, to address this issue, which affects all of us, but also in God's plan has the opportunity to revitalize a people and a country and the world. And so that's my kind of personal way of introducing this. I would love, of course, nothing else for all of the great ideas and work that you're bringing to this event and you've done in your lives to come to fruition. I want you to know you can count on Heritage to be with you every step of the way, to be here with my friend Delano, one of my heroes, Bob Woodson, sincerely, is a real privilege. God bless you all, and those of you I've not yet met, come back often. We'll watch a video, and then when it's time for Delano to come up, give him a rousing round of applause. Thank you.
The breakdown of the traditional black family was predicted 60 years ago by the Moynihan Report. Assistant Labor Secretary Daniel Patrick Moynihan authored the report that bears his name in 1965. Out of concern, the breakdown of the black family would become a self-perpetuating problem that slowed racial progress despite gains in civil rights. His warning was prophetic. In 1967, 3 in 4 black children were born to married parents, despite a 40% poverty rate. By 2022, the poverty rate decreased to 17%, but the non-marital birth rate increased to 70%. How did traditional black families go from the rule to the exception? The main reason is because only 33% of black adults are married, compared to 48% of Hispanics, 57% of whites, and 63% of Asians. Almost every disparity in social outcomes that vexes policymakers today is linked to this rise in family inequality. Rebuilding the black family requires a new call for national action. But unlike 1965, it will only happen if black leaders, not white liberals, make this a national priority.
Please welcome Delano Squires, Research Fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Richard and Helen DeVos Center for Human Flourishing.
Thank you for that applause. Sometimes it tripped me up because the introduction is so long, so, you know. Thank you, Dr. Roberts, for those kind opening words. We share this as a passion, and I'm appreciative of the space that I have to operate in this issue here at the Heritage Foundation. So thank you for that. Welcome, all of you here to Heritage for the Black Family Blueprint. Our call to action as the Moynihan Report turns 60. I'm going to keep my remarks very brief because I want to bring up Bob Woodson to have a fireside chat. But I want to say this. I've been here at Heritage for 3 years after working 15 years in local government here in DC. And there are two things that stand out about this institution. One is a spirit of gratitude. And the second is, as Dr. Roberts likes to say, radical candor. So we speak with clarity and conviction on the most important issues. So in that spirit, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you who are here today. Some of you I know well. Some I know the work that you do, and I extended an invitation, and thankfully you were able to come. Some that I hope to get to know a little bit more. This is a critically important issue, I think, to the country. The issue of marriage and family is critically important to the country, and certainly critically important to me. So thank you for being here. And I want to acknowledge that there's some people who are going to either here in the room or who may come to this event who wouldn't ordinarily come to the Heritage Foundation. I want to say a special thank you to you, because my contention is that the future of our children is important enough where at least for one day I'm hoping we can put other political differences to the side. And the second thing is I want you to be prepared for honest, forthright, transparent conversations about marriage, family structure, and the future of our nation. Everyone on the panels may not agree on every single thing, but that's part of the reason why I wanted to invite them. So I'm looking forward to this day. A few quick acknowledgments. One, to all of the panelists and moderators, thank you for taking your time to come here. I certainly appreciate it. I have some brothers from my church who are here, brothers who I know very well who are here. Thank you all. So folks, we had a Baltimore contingent that came down. I see Dr. King, Dr. Alveda King in the back. Thank you for being here. This is an important issue. We're talking about the black family today, but ultimately we are one human race, and these issues are ones that transcend race in a very profound way. My sister is here. My younger sister is here. She came up from Atlanta with my nephew. And last, but not least, is the wonderful, marvelous, beautiful, extravagant, highly educated Dr. Stephanie Squires. My wife is here. So thank you for that. I wish we had some of the young interns here so they can get some lessons on how to talk about your wife. But no, my wife is the most important person in my life, and she is an inspiration for all of this work. So I want for the next generation the benefit of what I have in my own home. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm going to talk to Bob, and then we're going to have a few panels, and then I'll come back towards the end of the day. But if you all would help me welcome one of my mentors, a person I've learned a tremendous amount from, Mr. Bob Woodson.
Is it on?
Is this on?
Yeah.
Is this on? Yeah. So Bob and I, Bob, we're gonna have a fireside chat.
Yeah.
There's no fireside, but we'll pretend that there is.
All right.
What I would like to do is for us to talk about the Moynihan report. Not necessarily as much as what it said, while that's important, but really how it was received. And you were around, active in the civil rights movement when the report came out 60 years ago. So could you just say a little bit about how the report was received, particularly by civil rights groups and other people at that time in 1965?
Well, good. First of all, let me preface my remarks by saying don't hold him responsible for crazy stuff that I say. Don't blame him. But no, I was. Just a little background. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a small black low-income community in South Philadelphia. As I told people, we had holes in our shoes and two parents in our home. But also elderly people could walk safely without fear of being mugged, and children were not shot in their cribs. It was a solid community. Dropped out of high school, went into the military, and saw raw racism in Mississippi. Finished my high school in college, went to college, and came out and joined the civil rights movement after I went to University of Penn graduate school. But so I was active in the civil rights movement in Westchester, Pennsylvania. That's the home of Barrett Rustin. And I met Dr. King because people don't realize that the national leaders would come through and identify, help us raise their profile so we could. And I was working with the Urban League at the time, and the Moynihan report hit. And it was met with consternation and resistance. First of all, I believe that Moynihan was wrong, and so was Johnson, in assuming that the state of the black family was determined by a legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. Facts did not support that. One of our scholars looked at the records of slave records for 6 major plantations in the South at the end of slavery. 75% of slave families had a man and a woman raising children. 75%, and even though they couldn't legally marry, and they rushed to marry after that. And so, so this was the state of marriage for 100 years. But when the Moynihan report came out, I was working for the Urban League. Remember, there were several other trends going. The poverty programs were starting. And so that's when poor people became a commodity. 70% of the money spent on poverty went not to the poor, but those who served the poor. And a lot of the black leadership transitioned from civil rights leaders to black elected officials, and they were the ones running these programs in these cities. And so it was a major corruption, a source of corruption and distortion. And so therefore, I was at the Urban League, and Dr. Robert B. Hill, one of the premier researchers on the strengths of black families, published a counter report on the strengths of black families, and it was a bestseller, but the Urban League wouldn't republish it because it interfered with the racial dynamic. And then you had another trend that Cloward and Piven, who were sociologists at the Columbia University School of Social Work. And then their thesis was one of the things that we should do in terms of addressing poverty is we need to flood the system with welfare recipients. That if you can separate work from income, school dropout rates would increase, drug addiction, all of the pathologies that you see. But
And why would they want to do that?
Because they believed in income redistribution. They were socialists. They believed that the only true source of a solution to poverty was to have redistribution of income. And the way you do that is bankrupt the system. But they couldn't just do it. So they were assisted by the Black Power movement, who believed that the nuclear family was Eurocentric and therefore racist.
I've heard Black Lives Matter say that. You're saying that was part of the conversation even in the 1960s.
Absolutely. Then you got the women's movement who were denigrating men So you got all of these powerful forces, but those forces alone weren't enough to tip it. What happened was the Office of Economic Opportunity, OEO, the government, set up offices deliberately in the black community to recruit people into the welfare system. Remember, welfare in the black community prior to the 60s was stigmatized. No one wanted to be on relief. So to overcome that stigmatization, they reinterpreted welfare as not social insurance, and then as reparations. And so the OEO, they recruited black people, so millions. If you read Fred Siegel's book, from Manhattan Institute, this future once happened here. He documents this, and what happened is that the blacks flooded into the system, 3 to 4 million in a period of just 3 years, in New York City and Chicago, and at a time when the unemployment rate for black men was only 4%. So it wasn't, and so what happened, that's when you saw the proliferation of out-of-wedlock births as a consequence of this change in power. So it was a combination of the denigration of the nuclear family, the Cloud and Piven's basic thesis, but then the government actively recruited people into the welfare system, and so you saw a proliferation of that.
Now do you all see why I wanted Bob to be here, to speak to that historical context? And one of the interesting things is, at one point, states obviously were able to regulate welfare eligibility, and many people have heard of the man in the house rule, right? That said that if the mother, well, married couples oftentimes were not eligible for welfare, but if the mother had a boyfriend who would spend a significant amount of time at the home, he was considered a substitute father. And in 1968, that rule provision was struck down. But what I find interesting is that the government had no problem playing the role of substitute father in millions of low-income homes. And I think that's what you're speaking to. So what I'm hearing from you is a combination of factors, policy, social, cultural, that started to disrupt family dynamics in the 60s.
And the ACLU came in because one of the qualifications for welfare at the time, you had to declare the paternity of the child. And so the ACLU said, well, that's a violation of the privacy rights of mothers. So therefore, they abolished it. Also, social services no longer offered, quote, services because having a baby was not a pathology. And so it changed that dynamic. I remember being, one woman at a conference said, I have 3 babies by 3 different men, and you are responsible for raising them or paying for it, and said it in a militant, aggressive way. Wow. That's the mentality that it put in place to do that. But also adoption policies. Dr. Robert Hill, whose research everybody should read, The Strengths of Black Families, just like with adoption, that's when they destroyed families too, because you had a lot of kids languishing in an adoption, but the kids who are come into the system, only 3 to 5% have any pathology. It's because they're parents. But as they come into the system and they move deeper, they keep moving from foster home to foster home, there is a decline, a psychological decline, and the more the child acts out, the deeper the child goes into the system, the higher the reimbursement rate. And so when you have, they're saying, well, black parents don't adopt. Well, Bob Hill said there were 3 million children in America at that time that were informally adopted by the kinship network. Right. There were 3 million. 1.5 million were black. And so the question is, if we will informally adopt children when there's no subsidy associated with it, why wouldn't we formally adopt when there was?
Bob, you raised so many great points. Let me ask this question. So you gave us a little bit of context in mid to late 60s. Can you speak to how the civil rights establishment handled the issue of familial breakdown, let's say from 1975, let's say through 1996 when welfare reform hit. So for instance, I know there was a CBS documentary entitled The Vanishing Family, Crisis in Black America that talked about the breakdown of the family. This was in 1986. So it was an issue, obviously, that people were thinking about, but can you speak to how this issue either was or was not addressed by the civil rights establishment in subsequent decades after the Moynihan Report?
I mean, believe it or not, I quoted Jesse Jackson in the 70s and 80s, and I used to work with those people. Let me quote with Jesse. This was in 1978. Jesse said, "Our children are living in depressed neighborhoods or on the verge of an ethical collapse." He further advises that morally weak people not only inhibit their own personal growth, but finally contribute to the politics of decadence. A generation of people lacking the moral and physical stamina necessary to fight a protracted civilizational crisis is a danger to itself, its neighbors, and to future generations. Jesse Jackson went from that to condemning Barack Obama for his speech at Morehouse, calling men to be responsible fathers. And Jesse Jackson and the civil rights leaders tore into Obama, and Obama caved. He could have been a transcendent president, but he chose comfort over conscience.
No, it's not gonna get me in trouble. No, trust me, John. I say plenty of other things to get myself in trouble, so you won't add too much on there. Okay. But you mentioned Jesse Jackson, and again, I'm going back to that documentary. At the end of that documentary, which started with Bill Moores asking a group of young women how many were married, none of them raised their hand, and asking them whether they all believed that a man was necessary to be in the home to raise a child. I don't think any of them answered in the affirmative. But at the end of that documentary, there was a young Glenn Lowry, a young Jesse Jackson, and a young Eleanor Holmes Norton who were speaking to this issue from a moral perspective. They didn't say, oh, we don't have enough resources. They were talking about the moral issue of family breakdown. And to your point, it seems that over subsequent decades, that part of the conversation has been lost.
I'm telling you, we spent $22 trillion on programs of aid to poor. 70% of every dollar went not to the poor, but those who served the poor. Jesse Jackson and all of those others benefited from that. Right here in Washington, D.C., 19 members of Marion Barry's administration went to jail for stealing money going to the poor, but yet he was still lionized. So we could have done, I think it was at the time, the Black Enterprise magazine did a survey of income differences among the black community. Those with $150,000 income went up 30% during a 20-year period, while those with $20,000 expanded too. Wow. So you have coexisting in the largest income gap in America is not between whites and blacks, it's low-income blacks and upper-income blacks. If racism were the sole culprit, why are not all blacks suffering equally? And it's always been a class dynamic, that low-income blacks on choice and education. They are supportive of choice, yes, leadership or not. Yes. And you can go right down the line. There's a huge bifurcation in the black community where they use the conditions of poor blacks as the bait, and the switch occurs when the money arrives.
So in the minute that we have left, as an elder statesman, because I do think it's important. Obviously, the issue of family, we're talking oftentimes about the future generations, and that's important. But I think there's something to be said for honoring. The Bible talks about honoring your mother and your father, and your days will be long in the land. I think there's something to be said for honoring our elders. So as an elder statesman, if the heads of the NAACP and National Urban League and National Action Network and all the other civil rights organizations were listening here today, what is it that you would tell them to do as it relates to this issue of marriage and family breakdown? Well,
first of all, I think we need to concentrate on strengths. If you say 70% of parents are raising children that are dropping out of school or in jail, and that means 30% are not, why don't we go into the homes of the 30% to find out why they are successful and others are not? Also, I would tell them to stop whining about white folks for 2 years and address the enemy within.
10, but you give them 2. That's okay.
That we need to be concentrating on our strengths. Everybody who failed the success sequence isn't doomed to a tortured life. And so what I have found in my experiences right here in Washington, others, there are people who form kinship networks, a moral community. Kimmy Gray right here. 680 kids went to college from one public housing project because they formed a family and sent kids to school. We need to, and then as a consequence of forming a moral community, many of those kids went on to marry, just like we did with the Benning guys. We intervened and stopped the violence. Many of these young men, once they became redeemed, the byproduct of that redemption was they married. And so we took some of them home with us, and we sat down with my wife and my children so they could see what a marriage looks like. Yes. And so we must do more than just whine about what the problem is, but we need to concentrate on solutions, and solutions are going to those communities. Nobody, left or right or center, ever goes into low-income communities and asks about their strengths and capacities, and we need to do that. Go into the 30% of the homes where children are being raised responsibly to find out what is the source of their success, and let's take what we learn and apply it to the 70%. That's what the Woodson Center does.
Everyone, please join me in thanking Bob Woodson for this conversation. Into our first panel. I'm going to welcome the moderator for that panel, Tori Snow, up to the stage, and then he is going to bring on the rest of our panelists. Tori, come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm Tori Snow, and I am extremely excited, privileged, and have the challenge of moderating a conversation between two very powerful, influential pastors, and they have their own microphones. So we'll see how we can get this discussion going. Look, in the beginning, God. We understand this to be the foundational aspect of our society, and we know that when we corrupt God's design for the family, the consequences are catastrophic. For 5 years, I broadcast in Baltimore City, covering the issues, juvenile crime, all of the challenges that vex many of our urban communities. And I can tell you firsthand that our refusal to acknowledge the intentional destruction of the Black family unit as a civil rights issue has led to unbelievably catastrophic consequences. So I'm really going to encourage you, as we get into our conversation with our panelists, I'm going to encourage you to pay close attention to the foundational principles that will be laid here, because this whole discussion this afternoon is going to be a journey through understanding the issue, understanding what has been done to undermine, and as we advance through how to move forward, it really does start with a fundamental understanding of the issues that we're going to get into from a spiritual perspective, because this is a spiritual battle. That's why it's only appropriate that we welcome to the stage Apostle Tommy Quick. He's the senior pastor of Promised Land Christian Discipleship Center. Pastor Quick is committed to community transformation, demonstrated by his development of the 47-home Trinity Gate subdivision, the establishment of Legacy Christian School, and the founding of Christian Families Against Destructive Decisions, CFAD. He's been married to his wife, Valerie, for over 40 years, and together they have 5 children and several grand and great-grandchildren. Welcome, Apostle Quick. And then we'll welcome to the stage Pastor P.M. Smith. He's been the pastor of Huber Memorial Church in Baltimore, Maryland, for over 40 years. He's also the founder of the Hope Academy, an elementary school promoting a Christian revolution in traditional education. He took me on a tour of the facility. It is an astonishingly amazing work that is taking place right in the heart of Baltimore City. Pastor Smith appears frequently in Baltimore's local Fox affiliate, where he discusses important issues facing our community. He is married to his wife, Dolores Stanton Smith, and they have 2 adult children. Welcome, Pastor Smith. All right, so, gentlemen, you have your microphones, and do I use the handheld mic or the lapel mic? The lapel mic, all right. All right, gentlemen, well, thank you again for joining us, and this is an incredibly important discussion. I'm just gonna come out right out the gate swinging hard. Why haven't more leaders condemned Black Lives Matter for explicitly and openly declaring that their goal was the destruction of the nuclear family? Where is everyone? Apostle Quick.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I did. Establish that. Because I certainly we agree that Black Lives Matter, and I think that deceived a lot of people because they didn't take time to actually look closely enough at the organization and what they actually stood for. I think it was a very brilliant move on their part to name it that way, because you become a card-carrying member simply by being Black. And with a heightened atmosphere of racial racism and racial separation, it was a great way to cloud what their real agenda was.
Yes.
I think that a lot of churches fail to, first of all, look at that. Secondly, I think that a lot of leaders were afraid of criticism if they stood against it, because it appeared that they were not for racial justice issues. And I think the combination of those 2 things, one, that it was camouflaged. Secondly, there was such a heightened interest in it in a corporate America, and for most, even local governments and so forth, they were trying to shield themselves by embracing it, that it made it very uncomfortable for men and women that were fearful of losing their own influence by taking the stand necessary to do it.
So, and Pastor Smith, maybe you can speak to this. Was this just a matter, in your opinion, of being passively, unaware, or do you feel that there were leaders that were supportive of the mission of destroying the nuclear family?
Thanks for the invitation. I hope I don't offend anybody, but if I do, I do. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." I'm in Baltimore City. I'm in the heart of the city. I live where I was born. I live on the same street. I'm 78. I live on the same street that I lived on for 19 years, since I was 19 years old. Got it? I'm in the city. I'm a ghetto kid. I'm the barber's son. I practiced law for 10 years in 2 states. I left the legal arena because all of my clients looked like me, and they were getting younger and younger and younger, and their offenses were getting more senseless and defenseless. By the time I tried to talk to them as a father and a man, it was too late. By the time they needed me as a lawyer, it was too late. So the Lord drugged me out of that and drugged me screaming and kicking into a ministry with 14 people. It's been 40-some years. The reality is, Black Lives Matter. Stage 1 thinking, according to Thomas Sowell. Sounds good, but you don't do stage 2. You don't think about what it means, what the outcome is, where do we go from here? And as preachers, we set our people up for stage 1 thinking because we preach in shout bites. We preach to get an emotional response. We string scripture together to get an emotional response. We don't force our people to think. So the church, big thunder, big lightning, no rain. Got it? Big thunder, big lightning, no rain. The African American church in America is a coward. The leaders are coward. No ministry, no organization will rise above its leadership. We got too many folk who are looking at the wrong preachers on YouTube and not looking and listening to the right preachers, the right teachers. When I came into ministry, I was told that everything that matters will take place in the sanctuary on Sunday between 11 and 1. That's not true. Everything that really matters takes place in a classroom with 5 or 6 people, or maybe with 2 people doing marriage counseling, or maybe with 4 people preparing them to say goodbye to somebody they love. Those kind of settings are based on relationships. The Christian faith is all about relationship, or it ain't about nothing. The culture's become transactional. What I can use you for, what I need you for, instead of relational. Love God, love neighbor. Love God, love neighbor. Love God, love neighbor. Reverence God, respect neighbor. We, as leaders, have become cowards. We run in popularity contests, and they just outscoped us. Our people are uninformed and mostly uninvolved. Black lives matter. Let me say it. I just wish it mattered to black people.
Well, look, I hear you. And look, from what I'm gathering, there's a theme of cowardice, right? A theme of folks not stepping up to the plate, not leading. And we can certainly hone in on the pastors. We can look at them, but there are other urban leagues. There are other organizations and entities that should have been the watchdogs. Someone should have picked up the block, as they may say, when Black Lives Matter came out and had this explicitly the destruction of the nuclear family. What do you say, Apostle Quick, to the institutions that talked about every other issue but refused to acknowledge that this threat on the black family unit, the nuclear traditional family, was there? What do you say to their silence?
Well, first of all, I'd like to just commend Pastor Smith on what he said. He actually touched on tremendous points that described the church today and its failure. I do believe, though, that there are other areas that have contributed to the failure of the church. I think that so often people don't really understand what the purpose of their preaching and their ministry really is. I think they're so often, with the demise of the denominational church and also with the rise of seminary, a lot of people have taken on church as a profession. They've approached it as an affection. It becomes a means of self-support. And as a result, people are simply not getting the word of God purely because people are self-serving in the pulpit. I agree 100% that too often pastors are corrupted by the pulpit. The pulpit gives them visions of aggrandizement, of being superior, of being great, being wanted to be known, well known in the community nationally. And anytime that is your goal, you will compromise truth in order to serve yourself.
Is it your view that that was the reason that they refused? Did they know about this?
I think that ignorance on the one part, because many pastors feel that preaching the gospel is not dealing with culture issues. They're told that you got to stay in the word, preach the gospel, as if we are unaffected by what goes in our community and our people are unaffected. And in that, they're cowards. I agree 100%. But also, the fact that we that do it suffer their persecution let us know sometimes that it's not always cowardice, it's convenience, because they don't want our voice to be heard for fear that it may convince those that they lead. To your second question, all of the institutions of America come from the family, from the home. Individuals that are born either within or without a family, a covenant family. All of the resources, human resources for every institution come from our homes. If our homes are immoral, if our homes if the people in the homes don't fear God, if they don't know that word, if they don't know God, if they have not been born again, have not received the baptism of the Holy Ghost, those people will feed into the institutions. Those institutions will then do what corrupt people do because they're not born again. So I believe that the institutions are self-serving. I believe that the Urvalung, the NAACP, of which I won their Man of the Year, Humanitarian of the Year award back in 2015, I didn't go to receive it because I do not agree with the things that they stand for. So I believe that these institutions are self-serving. I believe that follow the money. If you follow the money, you'll find the motivation.
Okay, so I want to put a pin in that because there were a couple of things that you said, but I want to go back to something you said earlier and give Pastor Smith an opportunity to address this. You mentioned, Apostle Quick, that attacks were coming from within. Those that had the courage to stand up and say, we cannot have an organization attacking a nuclear family, y'all were attacked. P.M. Smith, I know, Pastor Smith, that you have dealt with this. What does it take to stand up? Can you describe for everyone here, what did those attacks look like? When you take a stand on an issue, a biblical issue, you identify something like this, what does it feel like being attacked from people that are supposed to be aligned with you scripturally, that are supposed to be on your side? Can you tell us a bit about that?
First of all, I want to apologize for sounding angry. I'm not angry. I'm passionate. I don't waste my time, I don't waste my words, and I don't let other people do it. My hero over here started off right. The civil rights movement degenerated into something it was never supposed to be. When I got back to Baltimore from law school, all of the pastors were running community action agencies. And I looked around and I said, well, who's at home? Who's at the church? Who's teaching? Who's pastoring? And it became about money. Do you hear what I'm saying? No longer calling, it was a career, it was a profession, it was a money-generating thing. I didn't grow up like that. I had a job, I had a career, I had a profession, but now I have a calling. I don't play with that. I'm gonna die doing what I'm doing. Now, the leadership of the church is a chumps. We got to realize, I get attacked for this, we have a us problem. White people can't say that. I can say that. We have a us problem. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said that there are 9 areas where racism is practiced. Here we go. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war. Fine. And long as she was blaming white folk for everything, black folk were screaming. But then she said, we need to be counter-racist in our approach. And she said, the solution is so simple, I hate to mention it. Stop calling each other out of our names. Stop stealing from one another. Stop buying stolen products on the corner. Stop disrespecting one another. Stop breaking, and everybody got quiet. You know why? We got a us problem, and us is the solution to the problem. Does that make sense? Sure. I can say it, you don't have to say it, but you know it's true. You know it's true. I live on the same block that I've been living since I was 19. I live 4/10 of a mile from where I was born. My generation, a corrupt generation, the baby boomers, we abandoned the communities that birthed us, that set boundaries around us, and buoyed us. We didn't come back, we didn't send back, we didn't call back. So when there's a vacancy in leadership, the ungodly step up. The guy with the biggest car, the guy with the nicest clothes, the guy with the biggest money. So the drug dealers took over that whole inner city of Baltimore. Do you hear what I'm saying? That's because the baby boomers captured and taken out, like the Hebrew guys, we bought into somebody else's systems, somebody else's values, and we didn't come back to the communities that birthed us to elevate. It's on my generation, maybe not yours, but it's on my generation. So I speak truth to my generation. They don't like it, but they don't come. I try to connect to the next generation and say, I have something I can offer you. Would you please accept it? I'm not interested in the legacy. I'm interested in continuity. You are the next generation. Let's get ready for the next generation. A friend of mine who's been in politics for a long time say, PM, you know everybody don't like you. I say, that's fine, as long as the right people don't like me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, I reach to that next generation. I have to, because at this point in my journey, it's not about legacy, the individual looking back. It's about continuity. The next generation looking forward for the benefit of the institution. I want to give some things out if you would permit me to.
Well, let's get through the discussion if you don't mind, sir.
Okay.
If you don't mind. So,
All
Apostle
right.
Quick, but I would like you to speak to that as well, because Pastor Smith talked about this generational side of this. What do you have to add to that?
Well, actually, Pastor Smith have agreed, and I've agreed to disagree on terms,
Okay.
even though we agree on substance. My organization, the mission of CFAD is to influence the building of strong families and strong generational heritages through a biblical worldview. One thing that has been very successful for us, and I agree with him when he says that you've got to come down into the classroom, you've got to get down and deal with individuals. You can't fly over community and have this conversation and bring about change. The majority of the people that are here today are observing the issue, but they're not the issue, they're not the products of it. So this doesn't change anything but maybe a few minds. But what's going to change our nation is going to be involvement. Many times it cannot be in masses. It's got to be with a few people that you give yourself to over time. And so you have to have the idea that you're sowing into something that is generational, that what the time you're giving goes beyond. You cannot count the effect of it, because as someone has said, any fool can count the seasoned apple, but only God, the seasoned apple, only God knows how many apples are in a seed. So when we're working, if we're thinking in terms of mass change, then we can miss the opportunity to have tremendous change over time. And so with that, I would just like to say that we push the idea of legacy, generation. First of all, I want a legacy. I want my son, who is in the audience, amen, who is my co-pastor, to work toward having a legacy that his son will look back at to and follow in the same step. And if we do that, we are fighting for continuity, but we're giving purpose to each individual and extending, as it was, our own lives through our others by making sure that we pass on values that will stabilize that generation. Yes, sir.
Okay, so now I'm going to disrupt the conversation a little bit, because I think this is an important inflection point for the discussion. Should the destruction of the Black family unit be treated as a national, cultural, civil rights issue? We'll start with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
The answer is yes, but the question is, where do we start? Where we at? All politics is local. Ain't no need in me waiting for somebody to pass a bill for reparations. I ain't got that much life left. I'm not worried about somebody doing something to change the thing on affirmative action. I ain't got that much time yet. I got to work where I am with the people God has entrusted to me. And for me, it's the next generation. I don't have a son in ministry, but I got about 100 guys at my church who are my sons in ministry. And I'm going to give them everything I got. I'm going to light a fire up under them every time I get a chance. I teach them every Saturday from 10 to noon. And I try to give them everything that I've got in terms of life experiences for one purpose only. You got to fight. You don't have to worry about what outcome is, but you have to fight. Once you line up with the Lord Jesus Christ, you become a part of the church, ecclesia. That means you called out. Different in a special way, special in a different way. God made me this way. I don't go along to get along. I don't bend over. I don't kiss butt. Forgive me. I kick butt. Do you hear what I'm saying? I live in the city, Giovanni. You know that's how we roll. You can't bend over. You got to stand tall. You got to be able to take whatever they bring you. You got to not necessarily hit back, but you got to know you only get one hit. Does that make sense? At our school, we got to prepare them for a world they got to live in, and that world doesn't exist now because of technology, the acceleration of it, and the imagination of it. That world doesn't exist yet, but we have to build them and give them what they're going to need to succeed. Character, Christ-like character, integrity, values, foundation that they can build on. That comes from the family. It should come from the church, and it should come from our school. There's a book, I sent it to Delano. Dr. Robert M. Franklin, 10th president of Morehouse, wrote a book called Crisis in the Village. The village is in crisis. You know why? Because the three anchoring institutions are in crisis. Anchoring institution number one, the family, in crisis because there's no commitment to it. Number two, the church, in crisis because we don't have our mission straight. Number three, the educational institution, in crisis because we don't have a moral purpose. That's what he said, and it's true. The research lays that out. Family, no commitment. Church, not clear on your mission. Educational institution, not clear on the moral purpose of it. When the anchoring institutions are in crisis, then the village is in crisis, and we get what we get. Dr. Moynihan was right. Martin Luther King was right. Say, well, now where are we headed with this? Chaos or community? I don't know where it is where you live. What's it like? Oh, you done moved, Delano. You moved out of the city. But in the city, it's absolute chaos. There's only way to combat that. With the word of God, through a community of believers that are willing to stand up and go in a different direction and stand on this thing right here, the word of God, without any apology. The word of God. When I was a lawyer, I pledged allegiance to the Constitution. I'm a Christian. I pledge allegiance to the word of God. This is the blueprint. You talked about blueprint. That's a foundation for building something. But then you talked about action. If this is another meeting where we leave with no plan of action, then you done wasted my time.
Well, look, I could tell you that we're advancing into some of the more practical aspects of this, but I did want to give you an opportunity, Apostle Quick. Do you feel we should confront this like a national civil rights issue where we combat it with national discussions, policies, or do you look at it from a different vantage point and how to deal with that?
Well, first of all, I think if I had a problem, I'd approach it from every feasible direction. Okay. I would not limit myself to any one particular thing that I felt might help to bring about the outcome. So yes, I would consider that, but I'm convinced. I'm convinced, as John Adams was, that the republic that they built could not live or function successfully with immoral people. I think that most people adhere to that idea. I also believe that the family that God instituted, it was between he, Adam, and Eve. And then he was ejected, and because of that, we had murder in the second generation, and we've had trouble ever since. I don't believe that marriage and family coming together necessarily means success in those areas without God. I believe that it takes character and morality to make it work. So I think if we take it from simply a civil point of view, and I want to make this point, I think that we could fall short and find ourselves not able to really bring about the human flourishing that we seek. But I think if we can approach that as well as approach it from a spiritual, biblical point of view, which it is a spiritual problem, is not so much a civil rights problem as it is a spiritual problem. It is not natural for the family to implode, therefore it can be stopped. And what made it implode was people's decisions, and if you can change people's mind, you can reverse the trend. But the trend, the change of the mind has got to come from adherence to the biblical principle that it takes to make it successful. So I believe that what God has called me to do, and I'm glad the Lord didn't send me to Baltimore. I am. I'm so happy he didn't send me to Baltimore. It took Pastor to be able to deal with that. But I'm convinced that wherever we are, it is incumbent of us to actually get involved with people. We know they're coming from homes that are dysfunctional, where many times they have not seen a positive example of what a family is. And it's only by rubbing shoulders, spending time, giving your life with them, sharing your life with them, are we going to be able to make their framework for family and marriage change. And so therefore, along with the messaging, there's got to be foot soldiers. We've got to multiply them across that country. That's what I'm attempting to do through our family ministry school, and that is bring in pastors from across the country. We're dedicating 120 acres to a national CFAD family training center and retreat that we're going to build so we can bring pastors and what we call family champions, individuals who are not pastors, but they understand that pastoring, and we understand that family is itself the very foundation of every society. And because of that, they want to have an impact on children, boys and girls, to help them to shape them the right attitude toward marriage and family. And I believe that as we continue to reach, we've reached 10 states, we've got foot soldiers in 10 states, we're influencing families now. As we continue, we can raise up people that will have an impact internationally for years to come. But I believe that along with that, we need the area support of declaring civilly that it is the right, and I think that a lot of black women have been done wrong. I think that that's something maybe you want to talk about, is the fact that the Supreme Court said that people have the right to be married. So whenever they required them to stay unmarried to get assistance, they actually took away a fundamental right from those ladies. And that has fed into the situation that we're dealing with today.
So I'm glad that you went there, because that's where I was trying to guide the discussion, and now we're here, right? Because policy does have an impact on families, and you, both of you in your respective ministries, have seen the impacts. For decades, politicians in our urban communities have told us, if you elect me, I'll fix these issues. We have a governor in Maryland. I'm gonna end childhood poverty. I'm gonna do all these things. We're gonna help elevate young men. The theme that I've been gathering from both of you on this is that the message that politicians can somehow fix this is just not effective. Can you elaborate to the audience, why do you feel politicians have been so ineffective at preserving the family unit?
They're narcissistic. They only care about themselves. When they come into office, it's about GPA, greater political ambitions. Whether it's the mayor of the city or the governor of the state, they may make history, but they won't make a difference. They have adopted the policies of one party. And do I have to say Democrat? If we talk about Philly, Detroit, Baltimore, D.C., Democrat dominated, and they do what they want to do. Look, I'm dealing with a question from you. They say climate is important. They say Gaza, health care, AIDS. Where I live, crime is important. That's right. Where I live, the quality of education is important. Where I live, economics is important. Waste, fraud, and abuse by you, and making the community unaffordable for me and my kids. Every citizen deserves and desires safe streets, a great education for their future, their kids, and you stop stealing. That's what we deserve. But we've turned everything over to the NAACP, and they ain't been relevant since Thurgood left.
Right.
And listen, when I was in law school, Thurgood was my hero until I became a Christian. I said, I wonder how Thurgood voted on abortion. Dun-dun. Thurgood voted to abort black kids. I don't care what he did, civil rights. He can't get my vote, and he ain't my hero. You my hero. Do you understand what I'm saying? The greatest revolution that can take place in a person's life is to become a Christian. The greatest revolution that can take place in any person's life is to become a Christian. I was crazy, I was a rebel, but I'm a Christian now. I am old and dangerous because I have no fear of dying. I used to say to my people, I don't care. But now I say, I'm not afraid. Look, I look at the Gladiator every week. Russell Crowe. No, you got to get your motivation where you can get it. That's right. Russell Crowe's mentor say, you know, you in this arena and there's only one way out. On your shield. Russell got in there, they double-crossed him, stabbed him, he fought to the end. With his dying breath, they say, now what can I do for you? What do you want? He said, free my men. Mm-hmm. Did you hear what I said? Free my people, right? He's about to die, he dies. And the lady that comes out and loves him looked at him and said, soldier of Rome. Honor him. If you are in the arena, and I'm almost 80, but I'm still in the arena, there's only one way out. Charlie Kirk, 31, in the arena, an honorable death, only one way out, on his shield. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's only one way out of this thing. And she said, soldier of Rome, honor him. And they took him up and put him on their shoulders and carried him out. You know what I want them to do for me when at my homegoing service? I want them to sing the Solid Rock when I come in. I want them to sing Frankie Beverly, We Are One, when I go out, right? And I want somebody to say, a soldier of the cross, honor him and carry me out on their shoulders. There's only one way out. Only one way out, Brother Alexander. There's only one way out, and that's on your shield. So I encourage every man, every woman separated and called to commit yourself to the arena of warfare and fight to the death. It's only one way out, and it's a glorious way. On your shield, a soldier of the cross. Honor him.
Apostle Quick.
Yes, sir.
I am profoundly aware of the work that you and your team have been doing to be those foot soldiers. You use that word all the time, foot soldiers. How have the so-called foot soldiers in politics, because a lot of people look at these politicians that are in these cities and they declare themselves foot soldiers, where did they go wrong where you feel that your ministry will go right?
Are you asking me to compare myself with the politicians?
I'm hoping you can outline, because again, you got to understand their missteps. They've been telling us for years they're going to fix our families. They've been telling us for years they're going to end poverty.
I think our Oregons are different. I think that my Oregon is different from that of politicians. I think that mine is a life call, and that call is to be a selfless servant of the people. It wasn't something I selected to do. I didn't say one day when I woke up that I think I'd go to seminary and be a preacher. I was 24. I was drinking alcohol, using drugs, and all the other stuff that went along with it, and realized that my life was going nowhere. And for some reason, the Lord made me think that I was going to get old and die real quick and not do anything worthwhile. I decided to go to the church. I went to church. After about 3 Sundays, I found the right message, and the guy was telling me about a place called hell that was so hot that nobody wanted to go. And from the foolishness of preaching, I walked the aisle that day and gave my life to God. That was 51 years ago. Within 30 days, the Lord called me into the gospel ministry. I built my first church within the first 2 years and have been in pastoral ministry for almost 49 years today. My motive has been always to please the one that saved me from sin, the one that gave me the foundation for the great family I have, and the one that gave me purpose, that when I woke up in the morning, I did care that it was daylight, and I did want to go to bed at night. Before, I didn't care whether the day came or not because that was my state. I found my life in the church, and the church became my life. Church has a meaning to me that some people who are raised in church don't have. To me, it means life change. To me, it means regeneration, new beginning, transformation, translation. To me, I found an anointing, something that I did not have before. I also found self-respect, and I found some place where I could actually utilize the gifts and talents that God gave me without having to lay down at night with a conscience for what I've done. I think that that is different from most politicians. I don't think that all politicians start out wrong. I think that it's a corrupting system. I believe that being a pastor can be corrupting if you get with the wrong people. You've heard them all say, "What's up, Doc?" Man, I shouted them Negro Sunday. You know, they've got that whole thing going. But I think that I think that where they go wrong many times is, number one, you can get very disillusioned with the size of the problem that you deal with. You can feel like regardless of what you do, you cannot make a difference. And once they begin to feel that way, then it's just a matter of, then what can I do for myself and my family? I think that's often the case. I think that what I would remind them is that none of us can do anything without God. Without me, you can do nothing. So what I seek to do, and I wish that they all would do, is every day when I get up, what is it that God would have me to do today? Who is it that you want me to give my time to? Who am I to give and share my resources with? Who am I to open my heart and home to? And as I seek to do that and keep my ear to the Lord, I can keep looking back and seeing where we're having some impact. And that is really what I think that this life is all about. I agree with Pastor Smith. He's a couple of years older than me, and I bow in respect to that. I want y'all to know that he told me that it's how old are you, and I told him, he said, I'm older than you. And I said, that's why I respect. I'm not going to disagree with you too much. Not only that, he's a prolific speaker, so I believe he'd whoop me real good if I did. But nevertheless, I agree with him 100%, and that is that we all have to recognize that we're all going to leave here real soon. And I have something that I teach all the young people. It's called the rocking chair test. That's whenever your energy is gone, when you can't see, when you're peeping, your hands are trembling, and you have to sit in your chair most of the day. Can you pass the test for having given your best? Can you sit there and know that as long as you were able, you've held no cost, regardless of the cost, or regardless of the personal pain or whatever, you did all you could to lift somebody else up. If we can prepare ourselves, as he's saying, for that test, we will serve God every day with all that we got, knowing that we're numbering our days and our time is short.
I am profoundly aware that both of you have committed yourselves to the restoration of the family unit. Pastor Smith, you talk about this all the time, and you have a microphone to do so from, TV platform. CFAD exists entirely for the restoration of the family unit. I think that we've reached a general consensus that politicians aren't going to save us.
Right.
No politician is going to bail us out. This is a spiritual issue, which brings us to being aware of the fact that some 30 to 33% of Black people are even entering into the covenant of marriage these days. What is your ministry doing to specifically attack that issue? The fact that families are not being formed, that they're not being prioritized. Can you tell us, Apostle Quick, what your ministry is doing specifically in that area?
Well, I'll take a moment and do that. Number one, I like to say that family came on the radar. My wife has made my family life such that I wanted everybody to have what I have. We've been married a little over 40 years. She's given me wonderful children and grandchildren, 3 ordained preachers in my family, both my sons and my son-in-law. My daughter is an evangelist. We all worship together. Every Sunday is family day. We vacation together once a week. They live just a few minutes away, but they come in on the weekend. If I'm not going to be going away on holiday, they come in with sleeping bags like they're coming from Baltimore, and they make themselves out. That is something that I cherish. It's something I would want everyone to have. About 5 years ago, it was prophesied that CFAD would happen, actually about 7 years ago. At the time that it was said to me, I did not really catch it. I didn't understand that the guy that said it was seeing something that I had not yet seen. 5 years ago, the Lord set me down for 90 days, and during the entire 90 days, he spoke to me about the family's importance and what he would have me to do. When I shared it with the church 5 years ago, they grabbed hold to it, and they never let it go. For the first 3.5 years, we didn't even have an employee. We didn't need one, because the talents that God said were there, they freely gave to the Lord. The first thing that we did, we decided that family ministry is mission critical. In other words, nothing that we could do in this life is more important than what we do to shoulder the institution of family. And that's because that's where children are born. If we want to help children, either the unborn or the born, we've got to bring men and women together in covenant relationship, and we got to give them a mission to be a blessing to their seed. Having done that, I had to reform my preaching. I had to take a look at what I was doing and how I was doing it. I had to reform the programs in our church, even our worship style, to maximize and fortify the institution of the family. I did a complete canonical study from Genesis 2 to Revelation 21 so I could see the family of God in the kingdom of God, and came to understand that the family is God's medium for evangelism. And the reason that evangelism is so important beyond the family is because the family is failing. It started with a family, and in Revelation 21, it ends with families. I made a commitment to totally invest my life and all that I have into rebuilding the family and restoring the nation as God ordained that I should do. He instructed me to do that. And so I told the church, we're not about anything other than restoring the family and all of the resources we have, both financially and human, we're going to devote to that cause. So once that was determined that it was God's plan, then I realized I needed to impart and activate others through the Spirit to slay the same giant of family erosion that I was fighting to slay. Just a point of caveat, during the midst of this, the brothers came to me one day and they gave me a sling and a rock. And they said, you're a giant slayer. The next year they came and they brought me a sword. The following year they brought me a bow. The following year they brought me a shield. And then they told me, you know, warfare is changing and there's not so much close contact, so we're going to get you some arrows for that bow. And so I've got a nice little place in my office with all of these things that they put up there, and pastor is a giant slayer because we believe that this is the giant of today. My desire was to prepare as many others, and so we started training other pastors. We started training churches and family champions through our proprietary training courses that we have actually written. One of them, reparations that you can control today, right now. Why wait? God has a way of giving reparations to the family. It's all about marriage. It's all about parenting. It's about building houses. It's about, amen, being employed. And so we deal with that. We deal with the 7 change the framework. How do you actually take a person who is not a believer and convince them and they internalize the truth that revolutionizes their life? So we've got several courses that we've done. We've got pastors and community leaders throughout our nation now that are foot soldiers for this cause. In Detroit, in Texas, in Alabama, in Mississippi, North Carolina, in Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, and we're growing because we believe that influencing families on a local level is the key to really making long-lasting. We staged our mission through our annual National Family Conference. So grateful for Delano because he is a yearly appearance there. Dr. Woodson, my dear friend and my hero as well, sir, who took me under his arm at the very beginning of this mission. I called him, didn't know him, and he said, I exist for you. And he's been a constant friend and advisor ever since. We've dedicated ourselves to a CFAD online universe where people can take courses on family, amen, at no cost to them. We have also established a dedicated social media site and online universes at site to get people away from the TikTok and get them away from these things where there's so much negative going on. We established, the Lord bless us to establish our own social media site. We opened the first CFAD Family Training Center in our community to separate it from our church so that would not be a hindrance to people coming to take advantage of the services that we offer. We established the CFAD streaming television network on Apple, Samsung, Fire Stick, and Roku with 24-hour access. And I tell you, get on there because Delano is on there. Amen. Elder Woodson, Mr. Woodson is there, and many, Terrence Todd is there. We've got people renowned that deal with these particular subjects. There's much to be learned. It's available free, and we want people across the nation to get to it. We also broadcast this, as I said, over Apple, Samsung, Fire Stick, and Roku with many renowned folk. We've also piloted the Marriage Builders and Innovation Initiative. Thank God for the Woodson Center for their support. We actually target young men and women living together who don't know what covenant relationship is, and we will bring them, if they're willing to submit to our premarital training, we will give them a free wedding with the commitment that if they have issues, they come back. We've been very successful. We're hoping to duplicate that across the country. We've also invested in 120 acres. I'm so excited about this that I hardly know what to do with myself. That is going to be one of the few, if not the only, campus that's dedicated to training men and women from across the country, around the world, in effective family ministry. We have a 10-week family ministry training for churches. We do it for pastors. We have a family champion training that we offer. and many other resources that we have developed that I won't go into time right now. But we, like Dr. Smith here, we're determined to take this fight to the devil, and we could care less about who doesn't like it. We know that this is where the problem exists. I want to just add by saying this. The problems that we have socially are all rooted in the family. We can deal with the limbs all day long. We can deal with the fruit all day long. We can deal with LGBTQ, and we should. We can deal with sex trafficking, and we should. We should deal with fatherlessness, and we should. But unless we get back to building the family, as soon as we deliver one, there'll be 3 more hanging on the tree. We have got to go back to getting in people's face and show them the value of a covenant relationship with one man, one woman, and loving their children. And not only that, but the joy, pleasure, and fulfillment that comes from it. I've got 14 grandkids. Oh, my. That's my wealth. That's my wealth. Am I rich? I'm rich. If I didn't have a dime, I'd be rich. And I was in a place one time where I never hoped to go again, and the little man saw my family. He said, man, that's a lot of love right there. You need to get back to it. Everybody should have the joy of experiencing a home and a family like that. And we can make it happen. And here's a beautiful thing, and I'm done. I asked the Lord one time, Lord, how long does it take to turn a family around? I thought, well, 21 years, from birth to a man, a mature man. He said, yes, but it could be done in less time. You can turn a generation around in a few years with the power of the gospel. You can take a person on the street, hopeless, has no future, no way out, can't see his way. If you can get in his heart and get Jesus in his heart and show him a life that's worth attaining, you can actually make it happen in much less time. We see it happening every day. I want to encourage everybody, let's realize that this is the answer to the pathology that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Apostle Quick. Pastor Smith.
Okay. I don't have a little phone like that. Everything I got is in print, as you can see. Family. Family is the first institution God created, not the church. Family is an anchoring institution. That's where our values, traditions, and standards are stored and shared. Family is the basic building unit of every neighborhood and every nation. Family is the smallest unit of government. The smallest unit of government. Family is the greatest workshop for leadership. Brother man, you learn to lead when you are a dad, a wife, a husband, and a family. Family is the divine department of HEW. Anybody remember that? Health, education, and welfare. That ain't the government's job. That's my job as the leader of my family. Family is the survival unit for our future. Family legislates the behavior and the character of the next generation. That's why we see our juveniles acting crazy, and some of them ain't acting. Do you hear what I'm saying? It begins with family. God's emphasis is on the family. And the church's role, family formation and family affirmation. Family formation. In 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, David getting ready to leave. He calls his boy Solomon. He says, the first thing he says is, be a man. And then he says what it requires to be a man. For the average Jewish family is when you become a man. But for us, it's what does it take to become a man? And the first thing he says, keep the word of God, all his statutes, all his commandments, all his testimonies, everything that Mo wrote, you abide by. Right? He said, and then he said, if you will do that, gives a promise to him, you will have a legacy. There will always be somebody of your ancestry on the throne. Do you hear what I'm saying? Be a man. What does it take to be a man? How about a Psalm 1 man? Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. That's what we teach our 5- and 6-year-olders. a good man, a godly man, a Psalm 1 man. What does it take to be a man? A person in a position that lines up under God's word, then matures and get itself a skill in a job, then finds a woman of like faith. They build a life together. Then they build a family together. That's what we form and affirm. We try to keep it simple. And I'm working with the next generation right now, and we're looking at continuity, because when you use legacy, the culture says generational legacy and generational wealth. In Baltimore, the only folk with generational wealth are the undertakers. The undertakers. You know them: Wiley, Vaughn Green, March, Chapman Harris, and that's what our culture thinks about. No, legacy is more than that. It's continuity. We got to reach into that next generation. We got to tell them how special they are, how different they are, that God has a call upon their life. Stop, turn that media off, get off that social media, and listen to that word. And where's the word? You're going to find it here, because this is where the values are. This is where the difference is. This is what you build on. It's foundational. I think you used the word blueprint. That's for building. But the critical thing is action. What do we do, having come, spent the whole day, ate your food, your chocolate chip cookies, and sat here for 2 or 3 hours? What do we do once we leave? All politics is local. All change is local. Go back where you are and start where you are. Build, change, commit, grow. And let me say this: forget politics, because our people are loyal to one party. Am I right? Tell the truth. And our loyalty has now become our liability. Our loyalty to this one party has become our liability. William Clay, a congressman from St. Louis, Missouri, wrote a book, Permanent Interests. No permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. And the values and the interests of that party don't benefit our people. Am I right? Think about it. The values of that party, the policies do not benefit our people. Now, folk come at me for saying that, and then I give them examples, and I just simply say, what did I say that wasn't true? Our mayor hates Trump more than he loves his constituents. Our governor hates Trump more than he loves his people. We come in on the short end of everything if we're talking politically. Let's step out of that and do things the right way according to the word of God. Your values are with him. The foundation is with him. The change you need is with him. You've been called out. That's what the church is. Separated. Special in a different way. Different in a special way. God made you that way. And you are destined to make a difference. The church's role is family formation and then family affirmation.
Before we resolve things here, and I apologize, we're not going to have opportunity for questions, but I did want to get one more thought from each, 1 minute, if you don't mind, all right? You're describing a movement, all right, both of you. In order for this to take, you need people from across the nation to unite around a movement. Delano has popularized a term that ever since he said it, I can't get it out of my head: Black Lives Matter. What do you think, what comes to your mind about a nationwide movement that resolves the family crisis with a commitment to a spiritual pursuit of these issues? What does that look like from your perspective, Apostle Quick, a nationwide movement in which we all collectively focus on restoring the family through a spiritual appeal?
Personally, I think I described it as God gave it to me. I think that the question said if it was met with the enthusiasm of Black Lives Matter, what would it look like and what effect could it have. I'm not so sure that if it was met with enthusiasm of Black Lives Matter, that it would still solve our problem. I think that while we are wanting to make sure that we establish marriage and the importance of it, and while we want to recruit men into their positions, I think that it's got to be a holistic thing. I think that we got to recruit women. I think that men will have trouble actually being heads of their households until women are willing to embrace their positions. So I don't think we can target one without the other. I think that we have got to give time to development of both sexes and show how, through the will of God, they'll accomplish what God wants them to accomplish in life. But as I envision it, whether the name is Black Wives Matter or whether it's CFAD, I think that it's going to require the same thing. It's going to be a grassroots effort that's going to take a lot of people. I'm hoping 50,000 families can be touched. I'm hoping a lot of people will be recruited to become what I call family champions, who are willing to invest the time to really understand what I call black theology, and understand the challenges we have and understand that the Bible is the solution. And we have to have churches because people gather more frequently at houses of worship, whether they are preaching truth or not. And there's a certain respect normally in a pulpit there that permits people to speak more authoritative. And if we can get preachers to do that across the country, we can get individuals that will commit themselves to becoming champions of the family. If we can reach young boys and young girls, and I would like to add that, the Lord spoke to me whenever I was blessed to be in Tennessee with Mr. Woodson a few months ago, and while on the panel, the Lord spoke to me and said, we cannot accomplish this unless we can reach the teens and young adults. We have got to get them before marriage. We have got to get them before they go out and have babies. We've got to get them before they're indoctrinated by our culture.
Thank you.
And so we have started a process of recruiting young people riding on the violence that is taking place in our community. We've been able to touch some hearts. We've dedicated $100,000 to reach the first 100 kids with a 10-week program to teach them biblical decision-making so we can keep them out of that life, with the intent of replicating that program several times during the year, should the Lord allow us to do that.
Pastor Smith, your final thoughts.
We got to be aggressive. The leader of the family is the man. No nation, no neighborhood will be any stronger than the men who lead it. Black Wives Matter is men who make women wives. Am I right? Be a man, but that's not what I hit them with. I roll up on them, I say, you special, Broham. They like the picture. And nobody's gonna be angry when I tell them how special you are. The work you're doing, this is a good place to start, but don't get stuck here. The work that you're doing, I used to have your job, but I wound up going to school. A word of encouragement. You respect. How many kids your mother got? 4? Which one are you? I'm number 3. Tell your mother an old man said, and she don't know about the other 3, but she did a good job with you. Ain't nobody mad with me. And then I say, now look, this is you. You're special. This is me. I'm P.M. Smith. This is the church I go to. And my television program comes on at 6:30 Sunday morning. I know you're just coming in from the club. But stay woke long enough to check us out. It's only 30 minutes, right? And this inside is your invitation to come. Hang with me. When you get there, you're going to find 3 guys that you went to high school with, 3 guys that you were in jail with, 3 guys you were in the military with. You're going to find them sitting right up in Huber Memorial Church. And I say, and then see this $2? It's real. This your offering, brother. Got it? This is what I want everybody to get. And I invite them. You have to go get them, and you can't tell them how big a sinner they are. You have to go get them, and you have to tell them how special they are. You got to go get them and say, look, as an old man who thinks you special, you are a BMW. I didn't say you had one. I said you are a black man working. Thanks for not being on the corner. Thanks for not selling drugs. Do you hear what I'm saying? I'm an old man. I don't try to dress like them. I got old folks' shoes. I got 3 lines in my glasses. These teeth are mine. I'm losing my hair, but I'm everybody's grandfather now. Got it? And I can hug that young lady without any sexual content to it, and I can hug that young man. He ain't never been hugged by his grandfather. Do you hear what I'm saying? Give me a hug, boy. Come, let me hug that head. Great haircut. That's a big boy haircut. You got a big boy head. Do you hear what I'm saying? We got to go reach these guys because the key to the family is the mentality of the men, the commitment of the men to make that woman his wife and not his. No, that ain't quite what he using her for. That ain't quite what he using it for. And that's the reason we got so many these shows. Who My Baby's Daddy, DNA, divorce court, paternity court, no commitment to the anchoring institution of family. And it starts with men. Let's go get our sons. And this is what their eyes turn to me and almost water when I say, look, I've done everything you have done, and I probably did it more times, and I know I did it better than you. But I'm a Christian because as a Christian, I discovered you can always begin again.
Amen.
Am I right?
Yes, ma'am. Amen. All
That
right.
wins them. You can always begin again. Let's go get our sons first, and then we'll build a family. I'd like to give this to everybody. How can I give this out? Give this to everybody?
Back. Meet him in the
okay,
back.
meet them in the back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Give him a hand. Come on. Terrace. What's that, sir? Yeah, coming up, Terrace. Coming up next, Terrace Todd's going to be leading our next panel. Hey, Terrace.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, did you all like that? I'm mic'd up, right? Good, good, good. Give me another round of applause. First of all, I'm Terrace Todd. I am truly blessed and honored to be here. As some of you know, those of you who know me, I was actually here prior to the position I'm in now. A lot of my background has been in education, but about 10 years or so ago, when we're speaking about spirituality and whatnot, about 10 years ago, my bishop actually told me that the Lord was sending me to Washington. I'm originally from Battle Creek, Michigan. And I was like, wow, really? So then I looked up in 20 and I was being called by the White House, which brought me here. I worked for the Department of Education for a White House initiative there on educational excellence for African American students all over the country. From that point, I landed here at the Heritage Foundation, did outreach work here, outreach and coalitions work here, and then from there, I actually ran for office in Virginia 7, and then from there, I got a call from where I'm at now at the National Center for Public Policy Research. I am currently the director for Project 21 Black Leadership Network. You can actually go to project21.org. We also have, when we're speaking about family and whatnot, we have a blueprint there for a better deal for Black America that was actually released right from this very facility. Well, not in this room, but at this very moment. We partnered with Project 21 to launch that blueprint in 2022. You can actually go online and actually download a digital copy, as well as many of our other resources online that we do have with Project 21. So anyway, enough of me. I have been married, happily married for 26 years to the same wife. Isn't that wonderful? That is a beautiful thing, isn't it? Especially coming from a guy who did not have parents who were married, right? So I look to my grandparents. So again, when we talk about the Black community and Black families, in some cases, you know, you become what you see. And so thanks be to God, I had grandparents that I could look to model that for me, because like they had mentioned before, the pastors had mentioned before, sometimes with our children and today, I mean, when they're born into this world, they don't have the right model. And so we're here, and I thank Delano for actually having this, because we're here to try to set the right model for the next generation, so that way they will see the right thing and what God's plan ultimately is for our lives. Because it really makes for a better country, to be honest, and a better world So anyway, I'm happy with that. I actually have to slide out of here just so that way you guys will know that once we're done with this, because I have my wife of 26 years to go pick up from the airport when she comes in. So I don't want the first argument for us to have is when I'm late picking her up. When I tell people that we've never argued, people are like, what? What do you mean? I said, no, we set the foundation early. I mean, that was just part of our blueprint, right? That was part of the standard that we set for ourselves, that we would not get involved into this argument stuff. And to this day, my daughters, I have 3 wonderful daughters, they have never seen or heard their mom and I actually arguing about anything. We have executive meetings. You know, we have executive meetings apart from the daughters even wondering. So if something goes on, I was like, okay, dear, now help me understand, what did you mean by that earlier? Like, oh, well, dear, you know, da-da-da-da. So, I mean, that's just how we handled it, you know, and it was graceful. And at the end of the day, we did not let the sun go down on our wrath, right? So we can sleep peacefully and wake up the next morning peacefully, still loving each other and going on with the Lord. So anyway, long story short, I'm going to get right into this because I do want us to have Q&A for this session. First up on this panel, we're going to get more so into the relationship of marriages, between the husband and wife relationship, and we want to kind of drive some things home. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. First up, I'm going to introduce Calvin Roberson, some known as Pastor Cal, from Lifetime's #1 unscripted show, Married at First Sight. He is an author and relationship expert. He has been helping build and restore relationships for over 20 years. Pastor Cal is also the author of the book, Marriage Ain't for Punks. He and his wife, Wendy, run a marriage community of the same name, where couples receive valuable practical tools and resources to improve their union. Pastor Cal, please come on up and sit in this seat, please. Next up, I also have Miss Bridget Bartlett Royal. She is the founder of Black Bridal Bliss, a digital platform she launched in 2010. She is also an award-winning lifestyle writer and editor who has been published by BET.com, Essence, People, Travel and Leisure, and the New York Times. Bridget has contributed to best-selling book projects on the lives of Maya Angelou, Aretha Franklin, and Michelle Obama. The Queens, New York native and her husband have a 6-year-old son, Ms. Bridget. I just saw, look, it was 6 and hyphenated, so that's why I was like, wait a minute, let me go to the next line. Like 6 kids, wow. But yeah, please, Miss Bridget, please come on up. And last and certainly not least, Mr. Khalil Thompson. He is the founder and executive director of Win with Black Men. He is a political strategist and veteran of the Obama presidential campaign whose focus is harnessing the collective power of black men for positive change in our community. He has collaborated in the past with civil rights organizations such as National Urban League, National Action Network, and the NAACP, among others. Khalil builds bridges across generations by empowering underserved communities nationwide. Bless you, sir. Mr. Khalil, come on up, man. Have a seat. All right, this first question is for everyone. And, we got the young lady in the middle. All right. This one is for everyone. What effect, if any, do relationship podcasts and platforms such as the late Kevin Samuels have on gender relations within the black community? I will start with ladies first, please.
The pressure.
Pressure.
Hello, everyone. So I think, healthy, respectful discussions, discourse is positive. Mm-hmm. It helps us grow. I, don't agree with everything that's been said here thus far today, but I appreciate hearing it nonetheless, and I hope people feel the same about everything I have to say. That aside, I think that the majority of the relationship podcasts and what we see on social media, relationship influencers, are looking at things from a very one-dimensional lens. All relationships, and certainly romantic relationships, have nuance. And, we're looking at this content, people on yachts, on their vacations, and everything is up, and that's not realistic.
Yeah.
True relationships have ebb and flow. And I think, in terms of what we're seeing in modern times, in terms of podcasts and so forth, don't really do deep dives. Mm-hmm. And we get, I'm a writer by trade, so it's about clickbait.
Yeah.
Quick responses, but that doesn't foster healthy, relationships over time. So that's really where I am right now. Also, I think we're going to get into this more a little later, but I'm in my late 40s, but I think, certainly young people like still in their 20s, everything is so immediate, and social media has a lot to do with that, right? And so my husband says, they have the attention, we collectively have the attention span of a mosquito. And if you're going to, stick it out in marriage, it's not a quick thing. It's looking at the long game, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. I don't think a lot of relationship podcasts, I'm sure they exist, the majority of them, don't talk about that sort of thing. So you're not happy, you should leave. Well, we would all commit suicide if we weren't happy every day. I don't know that's not part of the human experience to be happy every day. And our relationships mirror that. I'm not saying that you should, stay married. Certainly not suggesting that people should stay married under all circumstances. But this idea that, again, relationships are just very one-dimensional and that they all look alike. You talked about you and your wife not arguing. I cannot say that about my husband and I. But I actually think it's positive for our son to see us problem solve.
Oh, absolutely.
And for us to, tackle challenges
That's right.
together. So I can go on and on about this, but I'll stop you.
No, that's great. Next, Pastor Cal.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. One thing that really annoys me about social media, the Monday morning quarterbacks telling you about relationships. Number one, everyone's speaking from their just reactively.
Yeah.
And everyone is focusing, it seems as though from what I've seen out there are a number, I'm not going to give any names because I don't want to give anybody credit. But one thing that I've seen is that everybody is focusing on being happy. And I don't believe that happiness is the goal in a relationship. When I talk to couples and I ask them, well, what is your goal? Probably 8 out of 10 of them will say, my goal is to be happy. And I ask, how do you measure that? Because happiness can't be measured.
Right.
For something to be a goal, it's got to be specific.
That's right.
You know the whole SMART
That's
acronym.
Right. That's right.
It's got to be specific, got to be measurable. It has to be
attainable,
right.
and
realistic and time sensitive.
That's right.
So when it comes to being happy in a relationship, you can't look at happy and say it's specific. It's definitely not measurable. It's not time sensitive. So I think, though, that social media is really focused on everyone just feeling good. It's focused on everybody just, and that's what, going back to what you're saying, if you don't like them or if you're having trouble, leave. My parents were together for 35 years before my dad died. Now, was it perfect? Absolutely not. I saw imperfection, up close and personal. But one thing they did do is that they vowed to stay together.
That's right.
And I don't see that same kind of stick-to-itiveness, that same kind of permanence, that same kind of commitment to covenant.
That's right.
In social media. I think that is the biggest challenge we have.
Yeah, sir.
So Delano and I talked about this months ago. I see it as an erosion at the beginning. So many of us have seen that pop the balloon phenomena that's going on. I think it's the worst thing. I love Archuleta. I think it was a great phenomenon when it started. But you're making a millisecond decision on what could be your blessing and your partner for life. Now, maybe it's not, but I don't like the man's shoes. He's not tall enough. She's not wearing the right, like all of these things that are minuscule in determining who your partner could be. Now, I don't know if it's just my algorithm or my feed, but I'm getting that on top of some of the Kevin Samuels, on top of wildly some divorce court things and child custody cases. I have no idea what's going on my Instagram. But what I'm concerned about is that what I see for our community, I don't see that being reflected in other communities. And so there's this narrative that's being pushed, this further chasm that's being widened between black men and black women. And so if you're trying to figure out who your partner is and this is all you're being fed on a daily basis. And now for some of our youth, my daughter happens to be 8. My wife passed away in 2019. And so I'm concerned, and I'm sure she would have been, that they're consuming information faster. There's things she can do on my phone I didn't know you could do. And my concern now, if these millisecond decisions are being determined about how she's thinking about a partner, what determinations she's making about what values she's setting on what a partner should be, I can do all that I can, but if this is being pumped into her feed on a daily basis, she doesn't have any social media, but if her friends and others are seeing this on a regular basis, how is this going to erode whatever foundation they're trying to build? Much like some of what I've heard earlier, I use the mold of my parents who are still together. They still aggravate each other. But when they're apart for any long period of time, we see that longingness to get back together.
Yeah.
And I think to what you were saying earlier, there is this quickness that we see with social media to make these quick determinations and not to stick it out. You have all of these apps that you can swipe left or right and make a quick determination of who you want to be with, but then you're not figuring out who you are,
That's right.
what marriage you want to have, and what partner you want to have to see if you can sustain it with them.
So let me ask this. So what do you all think about when it comes to mass media like music and television and film, the role that plays in that as well? I mean, we're dealing with social media, but what about music? And I'll start with you since you ended.
I grew up on Snoop Dogg's The Dog Pound. We all remember the interludes that would happen. If you don't worry about it. It didn't change my perspective on how I viewed my potential partners, but I think it's different now. There's no, I forget the comedian's name. I think it was David Cho who was saying, maybe I'm getting the name wrong, but he was saying, you can walk in anywhere right now and play a Biggie song, you know all the lyrics, we could just start off. I can't really describe drill rap to you. I can't really describe mumble rap to you. I don't understand it. I'm not trying to say I'm old, I just don't get it. And without having some sort of lyrics or verse or musicology to anything, what are you then translating in the music that you're trying to share? So if this is now a ballad that's describing love, but you can't understand what the person is saying to describe love, I don't know what the music is then trying to say.
Yeah. Yes.
And to piggyback that, there's so many great things about technology, of course, but one thing that I think especially hurts our culture is, like, I grew up during a time when Saturday morning, it was time to clean up. So my brother and I knew Saturday morning, okay, you're cleaning the bathrooms, you're cleaning, it was just, we knew. And all of my friends.
Attack plan, huh?
Yes. And if it wasn't done up to par, you're going to do it again.
That's right.
And all of my friends grew up the same way. But during that time, we heard music. So I know the Temptations. I know the OJs. I knew the music that my parents listened to. These days, everyone has their earbuds. You know, like, I've had interns at work who didn't know who New Edition was, which I was highly offended because I love New Edition.
But you can dance if you want, like,
but that's part of culture too.
Yeah.
So to your point, the balance. So yes, there was Snoop Dogg and Foxy Brown and like some other, questionable things when I was a teen. That was popular music, but I also had my parents' music.
That's right.
Now, if it's just Sexy Red, and I'm a golden era hip hop nerd, my issue with Sexy Red is not even as much the content as she can't rap. Like, she can't flow. She's not a lyricist.
Yeah.
So anyway, I digress. But I say that to say that your question, I think it's about, we could all talk about how much better things or the music was and the movies or and the TV shows were. That's not going to move us forward.
Right.
We are where we are now.
Right.
But I think it is important to talk to our children, our godchildren, our nieces,
right.
our nephews, and provide balance.
Yeah.
We try to.
I have adult children. And my son woke me up and said, Dad, you're talking about our music. Because I brought them up on old school.
Yeah.
He started telling me about, Let's Get It On, Marvin Gaye. And you go back in the 60s even. Music has always been edgy.
Yeah.
It's always been edgy. It's always been provocative. You know, but the difference when I was coming up was that our parents monitored what we heard, especially in the home.
That's right.
Especially in the home. Now, of course, as you said, with earbuds, et cetera, you can't always do that. But I think it comes down to the parents. If I teach my kids what good music is, and I teach them what morality is, and I teach them basically the principles, as you know, the good pastors were saying before, the principles straight from the Bible as to what spirituality is, what morality is, you know, what God requires of us. You know, then it's almost like I don't have to worry about what they listen to. Even if they listen to something that's a little errant, they're going to come back to home base. So I think that's
right.
how we have to focus on that. Not so much as, you know, what artists are saying, because I don't know what you were talking about with dro rap, and I'm like, dude, you tell me you don't understand it. I don't even know what it means. I was like, what is that? You know, but, yeah. So I think it goes back to the parents.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, and I'm glad you mentioned that because for me, and I think that's why I kind of gravitate a little bit more to even the old school TV shows. Yes. I mean, because you don't see, you know, the Cosbys anymore. You don't see, you know, the Jeffersons. You don't see even Red Fox. I mean, Sanford and Son. Even though he was a widower, he and his son still had a relationship, and they were in business together. Absolutely. You know, even though James Evans and his family were in the ghetto of Chicago, but they were all still together. Yeah. You know, they didn't look ghetto, they didn't sound ghetto, they still had a standard. It doesn't matter where they were at, they still had a standard for living because they had both father and mother there rearing their children. And so that's why I brought that up. And I know we kind of lean more towards what we're listening to, but also Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw men unto me. So you tend to become what you see. And so a lot of what I came up with, I actually saw those shows. So naturally, I kind of gravitate back to that because family is very important. So those were really, you know, during those times, that's when I used to see a lot of family-oriented shows. And of course, I mean, you know, I'm 52, be 53, Lord willing, in January. I mean, the TV used to shut off at a certain time. You know, now that's right. So now we're beyond that. But I don't want to belabor this. I do want to get on into this because we're going to have Q&A toward the end here. But first question is for you, Pastor Cal. Tell us about your Marriage Ain't for Punk system. In other words, what are the main challenges you help couples work through that system?
Thank you. You know, what my wife and I have done, and I have to include her because she is my right hand.
Yeah.
But what we've done is we've taken, you know, our last 25 years of relationship counseling, et cetera, and we now teach families, couples specifically. We've been doing conferences, we've been counseling people. We teach them 4 basic principles: maturity, accountability, pursuit, and surrender. And those, I believe, are so important when it comes to marital stability, because one thing that we found in all the couples that we've been counseling, whether I'm doing it on TV or I'm doing it in my office, one thing that I've found is that people need to understand what maturity looks like.
That's true.
Maturity has to do with responding and not reacting.
Yeah.
And I believe that quite often when we talk about the solidity and the stability of marriage, we have to learn how to communicate to each other.
Yeah.
We have to learn that everything is not an offense. So in the maturity part, that's what we do. We teach people, listen, learn how to take some things you don't have to respond to.
You're right about that.
Sometimes I tell guys, sometimes you just take an L.
That's right.
Everything's not a fight.
That's right.
And then accountability has to do with the fact that no one is to blame. We teach couples that whenever there's a conflict or a problem, understand that problem is the problem. You can't attach that problem to the person.
True.
So you take that problem, you objectify it, put it on the shelf, and say, look, we're going to approach that thing. This is not about us. That problem is an enemy of our marriage.
That's right.
And then we talk about pursuing excellence, pursuing legacy, pursuing financial success, and then lastly, surrendering, which has to do with basically learning how to deny yourself. We were talking earlier about submission in the room that we were all in. We were talking about submission and how, you know, I hear a lot of men talking about how they want the Proverbs 31 woman and all this. You know, there are Proverbs 31 men also. You know, men and women have to learn the art of submission. We have to learn the fact that everything isn't about you.
Yeah.
It's not about you. It's about us. It's about this legacy that we're trying to create. It's about this family, these children that we're raising.
Right, that's right. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Did you guys want to add to his conversation on that? Did you have any questions for him at all? Okay, if not, I'll keep it moving, but I mean, I thought maybe he said some things that you might want to ask him about.
I just want to comment, you mentioned communication.
Yes.
And I'll say I've been married 12 years Sunday. I thought I knew how to communicate. I tell you something, you listen, you tell me something, I listen, we've communicated. No, at least not in my union. So one instance, and this goes back to the happiness thing, and I'm a writer. So I wrote my husband this letter, it was an email, and I mean, whew, it was, yeah, got it, you know, and maybe paragraphs 26 is when I said, but I do appreciate that you do this, and this. So in talking to my therapist, our therapist about it, at one point we were, and she said, well, the tone. So communication, everyone talks about any relationship podcast, any relationship, but people talk about communication. Most people don't know how to communicate. And certainly not in relationships, in matters of the heart. So my husband didn't even get to paragraph 26 because by the second line,
oh yeah, he's done.
He was done. And timing, as soon as you walk in the door from work, we live in New York, so he takes the subway in you know, to his office.
Yeah.
I can't hit him with something as soon as he comes in. He was just on the subway.
It's a minute.
He needs a minute,
Right.
as I do. So I just wanted to say that because I think everyone talks about communication, but we really need to peel back the layers and talk about what effective
Yeah.
communication is.
And in the book, I talk about pathways of communication, because communication is not just talking. You know, communication is, as you said, it's your tone, it's your eyes, it's silence. Because we communicate sometimes. Look, if I'm arguing, I'm riled up, and my spouse is saying nothing, she communicating. She's telling me a lot. She's telling me, number one, shut up, because I'm real close to losing it. But so silence is a part of communication. So I think that you're absolutely right, that when we talk about communicating, we have to realize that if we're going to connect, if we're going to really get to know each other, marriage requires, that's why the book is entitled Marriage Ain't for Punks, because marriage requires intentional effort. It requires me actually watching what I say and being cognizant of what I say. We have this idea, and I know I'm going off on
No, you're
tangent.
good.
We have this idea that once we get married, we ought to, as they say, keep it 100. We can say whatever we want to say. No, you cannot. It's when you get married that you have the most boundaries.
That's true.
You know, and my boundaries, at my house, I have boundaries. You can't just come onto my property. You just cannot, because it's my property. Now, I can invite you over. I can allow you on my property. But those are my boundaries. And we have to understand that in marriage also, that there are boundaries. My wife, we both are second-timers. And I tell people that with no shame or regret. But we're both second-timers. And we realized we got married very young, very dumb. And we ended it.
Yeah.
So, and then years later, we found each other. Praise God, we got married. We've been almost 20 years now. Awesome. Y'all can clap. But it's almost 20 years. But what's interesting about it is there are things that she experienced, and we talk about this openly in our conferences. There are things she experienced in terms of abuse in her first marriage, and we talk about it, so I'm not sharing her business, but we talk about the fact that there are some things I cannot say. I do not raise my voice. There's some things, because there are boundaries, certain things that she knows not to do with me. She talk about celebrity crushes, I'm her celebrity crush. You know, because there are certain boundaries. And I'm saying this to say that when we communicate, we have to be intentional about how we communicate to one another.
I'm not sure if this fits, but to your book, as you were talking, I'm thinking through this most recent debate between Russell Wilson and Future, and who's a simp, and who's actually stepping up and being manhood and being in a marriage, and going to the conversation that we're having right now. And I am firmly in the Russell Wilson side. Like, I don't understand why this is even a conversation, this is even a debate.
Yeah.
This is a man that decided to step up, marry the partner
Yes.
that you chose not to marry, that you chose to have a child with and not enter into a
Mm-hmm,
union with. And is still giving you respect as the father. He's not taking anything away,
Mm-hmm.
not speaking ill, but for some reason there is this conversation, especially in our community, that is seen as being less than, or a punk as a man, corny, and not being somehow in living in this true state of manhood. And as you're speaking about your book, I'm thinking about this. I know this is some of the topics that we were trying to discuss this afternoon.
Yeah. No, this is beautiful. Next question is for Bridget. Bridget, so what inspired you to start Black Bridal Bliss and Black Baby Bliss? I'll start with that question. What would encourage you?
Sure. So Black Bridal Bliss launched in 2010, and around that time there was a lot of rhetoric around Black women, specifically educated Black women and high-earning Black women not getting married. And the Washington Post, and we're in D.C., the Washington Post did this huge feature on it, and it was so depressing. And I knew better. So, and it makes sense. Most educated, the more educated you are, you tend to get married later. There are a lot of factors. I won't even go down that rabbit hole. But even if it was just, whatever the small percentage was, I wanted to showcase those women.
Yeah.
And those marriages, right? And those weddings. And Delano and Stephanie, his wife Stephanie, were one of my featured couples. But it was, I was trying to, show not just the wedding, and I want to speak on that, but a little more, but not just the wedding, but the relationship, the couple.
Yeah.
Because no one was talking to our couples in that way. So, Martha Stewart weddings, all the major, bridal magazines, they weren't showing like at our weddings when someone is Greek and they're like stepping or strolling at the wedding reception, or if it's a Nigerian couple, they're spraying, or Caribbean, Jamaican wedding, they always have black cake at the reception. They're like certain parts of our culture that I thought were just beautiful and special and unique that I wanted to cover. What I will say, truth time, in 15 years, social media, everyone is posting their wedding pictures, right? And it's become like a little bit of a circus. Because we know a wedding is not a marriage.
That's right.
And so I'm actually in the process of evolving Black Bridal Bliss. It's still cooking. Okay. It's still marinating, I should say. But yes, I still absolutely want to focus on weddings, but then marriages. And from a realistic standpoint. In terms of why I started Black Baby Bliss, it was sort of a natural progression. And then I had a baby. So.
Oh, nice. So yeah. Well, congratulations to you. But do you think that marriage holds the same value with Gen Z as it does the previous generations?
I don't.
No. Okay.
I don't, and I think we're partly.
that is?
I think we're partly to blame. Someone earlier was talking about the baby boomers. I'm Gen X.
Me too.
Okay, but I think. It doesn't necessarily look like something to aspire to from their limited lens. You spoke about your grandparents.
That's right.
Right? Even though your parents weren't married, like you had that generation to look to.
Yeah.
Very much like we were talking about the music and the TV shows and the movies. So as a culture, I think we have to get back to telling our stories. So, again, the rhetoric of like, lower income communities are dirty and people don't take care of their neighborhoods. And my grandparents were poor, grew up in the rural South. You could eat off of my grandmother's floor.
Yeah.
I don't believe that hype. My mother, I grew up hearing her tell me that her grandmother prayed for her grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren. So when I knew, like, to walk through the world and move through the world knowing that there was someone praying for you before you were born is different. That's generational wealth too. So I think to your point about Gen Z, and the alpha generation, I think is the like my son's age, we have to pour into them and tell our stories. So our stories, but our grandparents' stories, and stories that we heard from our grandparents, so that they know what they're made of what they're, how they're really built, regardless of what they're shown in the media. I don't think that we collectively do that as much as we could.
Good. No, good point. My next question is for you, sir. So do you believe that with black women being labeled or given the crown of being the backbone?
I didn't know where you were going with this at first, so I'm glad. Okay,
Oh, no.
keep going.
So do you believe that women being called the backbone of like the community or the Democrat Party, for example, do you believe that contributes to some tension maybe in the home when black women are given that title? And we're specifically speaking about in black family homes between a husband and a wife.
I would answer your question speaking not necessarily about the home, because I think before you get there, some are going to college to get their Mrs. degree, where if most black women, because the options that they have for black men are decreased, whether that's because of incarceration or lack of enrollment, so they're putting in maybe an additional 5, 10, 15 years of education. So once they're now ready to enter into the market to get engaged or marry someone, their peers who've gotten married earlier at 21 or 22, they're now looking at it at 35.
Yeah.
The pool, there's a clip, I couldn't find it this morning, that's going around that if you're looking for a black man that's over 6 feet, that's heterosexual, that doesn't have a kid, that makes over 150,000, that lives here, that goes to church, this is like the 1/10 decimal of a man that you're trying to find and is available.
Yeah.
And will like you, that's just a very small,
That's a small
pool to choose from.
Yeah.
And so I think before you get to them being the backbone of the household and leading, they just have to find a partner to lead with and be with. And so then once you get into the home, early on, I thank you for asking this. I wasn't thinking about this. Early on, my wife made more than me. She was a doctor. She was great. Friends would come up and be like, "Oh man, you won the lottery. You're amazing." I never saw it that way. It was just a partner that I found that loved all of my quirkiness, and when I would yell when Game of Thrones was on, she would just roll her eyes and walk out the room. And it evened out to where we took our trips. She made more, so she would front load for the trip, and then I would take care of something while I was on it, and then I would pay her back. So it worked for us. But I also come from a household where it was kind of the same. My dad was starting off his practice, and then my mom was a teacher, so her salary was a little bit stable while he was building his practice. So for me, this wasn't abnormal. It just worked its way and figured us out in the middle.
Gotcha. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, personal story. I met my wife in 2008. No, we got married, 2008. And I was living in D.C. And I got a position in Ohio. We were not married yet. We were engaged. She had just started an incredible career where she was becoming a nurse anesthetist. She had been a nurse. She's on her way. I'm starting a new job in another state.
Yeah.
I'm going to be making probably a quarter of what she's going to make. I told her we could commute. It would be okay. Finish, do your thing. I'm not going to take that from you. Her decision, my wife's decision, she said, no, I'm going to give it up and follow you.
Wow.
She gave up her career and followed me, and we made 1/4 of what she was going to make. I told her, first of all, after much trying to tell her not to do it, because baby, we could use that money. But she said, this is her goal. She said, because I can find another job, I'm not going to find another man like this.
Oh, my.
And I told her, because of that, you will never have to worry about anything.
That's right. Beautiful.
She worked for 2 years.
Good stuff.
After that, she hasn't worked outside the home since.
Beautiful.
Because it was up to me to make sure I honored her commitment.
Come on.
So when it comes to a woman being the backbone of the family,
yeah, man,
it's okay to me if she says that, as long as she understands that the backbone can't exist without the body. You know?
Yeah.
So she was a backbone for a short period of time. Yeah. But now she understands, you know, as good Doc said over there, there's a hierarchy in our relationship now.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, you know, that we could use that money. I remember early on in our marriage, I was still at teaching salary. And so when my wife and I were expecting our first daughter, you know, my bishop and all these people around us was talking about, you know, her staying at home with the kids. So, you know, of course, affirm, provide, protect. I'm thinking the providing piece, I'm doing the math, man. I'm trying to figure this thing out. Okay, that means your salary is gonna cut, and that's gonna be on me. So again, had to figure it out. But it was the greatest decision we had ever made. And so even when my other two daughters were born after that, my wife stayed home, man. And the Lord provided. That's what was a beautiful thing. And I look at them now, and to see the fruit of that decision, I have my oldest daughter who's at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine in Suwanee, Georgia, in med school, wants to be an OBGYN. We have my second oldest daughter who's graduating from Western Michigan University this December with a psychology degree. My youngest daughter's a junior at Clark Atlanta, studying for, well, she's going into aerospace engineering. She's also in the marching band there and all that stuff. So I attribute that to the fact that early on that we made the best decision for our family that we could have possibly made, with my wife staying at home to be with our daughters. And again, the Lord provided. All the bills still got paid, but again, at the time, you know, I'm doing the math like you. I'm trying to figure this thing out. So anyway, on to the next question. Do you believe that marriage is a priority for younger generations, or will situationship, cohabitation, and conscious co-parenting become the default relationship arrangement in the future?
That's a tough one. I think we've all reflected on whether it's social media or where the current society is, it's leading to that way. I think the concern that many of us are having, especially for the Black community, is that the further erosion of that connection and the cohesiveness of a nuclear family only exacerbates other issues that are already existing in our communities. And so I think there is a level of consciousness and discourse that's missing from understanding why that's the case. And so youth, whether you're, this is a new term you taught me, alpha, or they're Gen Z? Gen Z?
Gen Z.
It's too many. I just knew what year or decade you were born in. We didn't figure all that other stuff out. They're now trying to figure out how to exist, and not only social media, but these apps, I think, are providing further, not only with options, but they're the opposite side with loneliness. There's only a small percentage of folks that are getting swiped right on or liked on and then going out and furthering a date. There's a larger pool of people who aren't getting that engagement, and then they're sinking into levels of depression and aloneness that they're not having any. So I think because of that, it's going to propel us in a direction that's not going to find that nuclear cohesion.
Yeah. What do you guys say? Okay, go ahead.
And to add, I will say, you know, co-parenting, conscious co-parenting, when it's great, it's great. And I know some couples that are doing it, and I applaud them. It takes a lot of intention. It's a lot of hard work. But, you know, it actually requires, dare I say, more communication, effective communication, sacrifice. You're in two different households. So it doesn't remove the need to communicate, because I'm no more, you know, we're no longer sleeping. Well, you may still be, but you're no longer, right, you're no longer romantically involved. You actually have to communicate more if you're truly co-parenting. So I just want to, you know, speak to this idea that, like, we don't need each other. We do. We do. And there was a clip we were going to show with, I don't remember the sister's name, but she's an attorney and she had a show. But anyway, I think she's the one that said she wouldn't date a bus driver. Or
Claudia Jordan?
No, but they know.
Okay.
So it seems like they do. So the like, you know, freezing your eggs and going to a sperm bank, and, you know, if that's the route that you feel was for you, I'm in no way knocking. I would never knock any woman for doing that. If she felt that was the right decision for her. However, again, thinking about just being in the moment, I know someone well who did that, very well educated, does financially well for herself. What she did not bank on is the sperm that she got. The guy, it wasn't just you. So her son has like 14, 16 siblings. That it stresses her out because she's the type of, she wants her son to know them, and it's like, how do you schedule that? It just opened a whole, and she did not consider that.
Yeah.
I don't think most people do.
Yeah.
You're thinking, I want a baby, and babies are only babies for a year. that baby has to grow up.
Grows, yeah.
You have to raise it, and and it. So I'm going off on a tangent, but the conscious co-parenting, it shouldn't just be a trendy term. We really have to think about what that looks like. It doesn't remove you from the work. You can, the work is still there. And dare I say it, like I said, it's harder because now there's so many other factors.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
You can't have your cake and eat it too. That's pretty much it. The fact is that, look, do you want stable children? Do you want well-balanced kids? Do you want kids to grow up seeing what a great family looks like? And especially in the Black community, we need kids to see healthy parents. We need emotionally healthy parents, happy parents. We need that. And while I understand, co-parenting and all that, look, at some point we have to say, how can I say this tactfully? At some point we just have to say, look, you're gonna have to just zip your pants up, just don't make babies. I mean, you feel me? Just stop making babies.
Amen.
You find babies are making babies, right?
Babies are making
Babies are making
babies.
babies. Yeah.
And we have grandparents at 30 and 40 years old, and so I'm not the one to say, if that's good for you, because it's not good for the family.
Yeah.
It's not good for the family, and we always want to make choices. I think that is the problem with a lot of the alpha generations and Gen Z generations, that everybody wants to make decisions that's good for them.
That's true.
At that moment.
Good for you.
That moment, that's right.
I talked, just one more moment, I talked to a gentleman when I was coming here from Pakistan, and he said that he was in an arranged marriage. He's been married for 35 years. Arranged marriages have a 90% success rate because they are marrying for principle. They're not falling in love. They're growing in love.
Growing, yeah.
And everybody wants to marry now and get together because you've fallen in love. I feel good. Oh, you fine. That's BS. We need people to get together for principle, based on values, and then grow in love after that. And I think that's my 2 cents on it.
So piggybacking off of what you're saying, next question for you all. So then give us 3 ways that men and women can model healthier relationships in their personal lives.
Focus on faith, family, and finance.
Faith, family, finance. Why those 3?
If you can figure out for yourself how you navigate these 3 factors, and then if you can find a partner that's equally yoked with you in those 3 factors, then you're on a road for success. It's not 100% guaranteed, but you're more than likely going to find a way that the 2 of you can work it out.
The odds are better.
The odds are better. Yeah. I think we're talking about a generation who they don't know who they are. They haven't necessarily figured out where their family dynamic is. I'm not sure at 20-something they figured out their finances. And so now you're entering in a union and getting with someone or having a child and then trying to figure out how your family's going to work. It's not a recipe for success.
Gotcha. Bridget.
I would say, 1, giving your partner grace. Of course, hoping, praying that they give you grace, but I think a lot of times the me, social media, we want grace, but you have to extend that grace to your partner, understanding that you're both bringing baggage, more than likely from your childhood, definitely from previous, relationships, to the marriage. And that plays a part in the dynamic of the marriage. It doesn't mean that it's broken.
Yeah,
It means you had a life before the marriage.
that's right.
And then I don't think we talk about this enough. Like, remember to have fun, because it gets heavy. It gets heavy, but like, remember, like, you know, you chose this person, you chose each other.
That's right.
So like, remember to have fun, because a lot of the things that, you know I stress about, like in 2 years, it won't mean as much. Yeah.
Sir.
3 things: self-awareness, know yourself, understand your own challenges, your own issues. Stop blaming other people for your mistakes. Number 2, God awareness. Make sure you understand that you have to establish some kind of values in your home. You can't just fly free and just whatever. There has to be values.
Yeah.
And thirdly, there has to be community awareness.
Yeah.
You have to understand that your family is going to affect other people.
True.
And if I do a good job raising my kids, those kids are going to do a better job finding someone, affecting their community. Bad kids lead to bad community members.
That's right.
You know, bad marriages make for a bad community. So those are self-aware, God-aware, community-aware.
So for this fine panel, we're going to have an open Q&A. Who wants to start? First question for Q&A. There's a microphone in the back of the room for anyone who has a question for either of these 3 individuals. Greatly appreciate it. If there aren't any.
Great. All right.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh, go to the mic. Thought I saw someone get ready to stand up. All right, we got one.
Hi, thank you for everything that you're sharing today. I had a question specifically in line with the media content that you were talking about. I love what you were saying about Black Bridal Bliss and how you were showing those Black families and how telling those stories are impacting what the next generation is seeing and how that's important in contributing to strong families. So I was just wondering if any of you really could elaborate a little bit more on the current media landscape, not so much social media, but more the movies. Like I remember, for example, when I was growing up, my mom didn't let us watch the Disney movies because she didn't want us to only see one standard of beauty and grow up thinking that there is only one standard of beauty. And now that I'm older and I look back and see all of these values that are being pushed through media, I see you were talking about how young people are only doing things for their happiness, for decisions made in the moment. Well, all of our media is saying, you know, follow your heart, do what makes you happy. You know, you only live once, live your authentic self. Or you see men being seen as either toxic or weak, but you're not seeing a lot of strong male figures. Or you're seeing lust being made fun of or seen as a joke instead of something serious. So all these different things are being pushed through our movies, our children's shows, and everyone's consuming it and not really thinking about how it's shaping the way that we're thinking and the way that we bring that into our relationships and into our families. So I was just wondering, is there something that we can do about that problem and about the ways that the value system of our media is impacting the way that we see family?
I think that's a Bridget deal, right?
So that's a great question. I think there are, because now as long as you have Wi-Fi and a device, you can shoot a movie, a TV show, what have you. There are a lot of smaller shows and movies. They may not be on major networks, but and we can connect afterwards. But there are definitely like some cartoons, and there's some shows that we watch with our son when we try to limit his screen time. But there are definitely things, they may not be on Disney or, you know, Nickelodeon Kids or, you know, the major ones, right? So that's the first half of my answer. The second half is, while mainstream, you know, media and what we consume on the large screen and the small screen is important, back to what I said earlier, I think what's also was important is like teaching our children their history, not just Black history from a larger, from a macro sense, but also like their lineage. Because yes, we all have broken marriages and broken relationships and broken homes in our families, but that's not our entire story.
Yeah.
For none of us.
That's right.
I refuse to believe that. So we have to lean into what someone said earlier, like we could talk about the 70%, or we can focus on the 30%. And what did the 30% get right? Or what do we want to, mimic? I think it's important to, I realize like everyone takes pictures on phones now. Like that's just what we do. Like no one has photo albums. I grew up, we had photo albums on the coffee table. We had, shelves with pictures. I grew up seeing my ancestors, so to speak, in pictures. And my son, I thought about it, it bothered me so much. I'm like, he doesn't have that because all our pictures aren't here. So I go to Shutterfly now and I try to, print books out and make sure he can see, where he comes from, the good, bad, and indifferent. But he sees a spectrum, not just what's on, God forbid, Twitter, TikTok, or, all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Next question. Did you want to go?
No, go ahead.
You sure? Oh, okay.
Just want to thank the panel. Just have, since each one of you are a mother and a father, I just want your one word when I mention motherhood and fatherhood. So for the mother, when I say motherhood, what's the first word or what's the word that represents motherhood to you? Love.
Love.
Fatherhood.
Protector.
Protector.
I was going to say protector, house band.
House band.
House band. The word husband is the house band. This is the person who bands the house to keep the bad stuff out and the good stuff in.
Thank you.
I'm stuck on the ladies' questions that you asked earlier. I mean, for me, we had Frozen for a while. That was not a good era. There was a lot going on with that movie. So we tried to get into like Encanto and some other stuff for when she was younger. But I think many of us can relate as we're thinking through those black films that came out in the late 80s, 90s, whether it was Boomerang or it was Love Jones or Love and Basketball, or I think we could go on with a list, but it showed this somewhat dysfunctional, but at the end, a healthy union of a relationship to some degree. And I'm a movie buff. I'm having a hard time right now thinking of a recent film that showed that. And I love Tyler Perry for what he is and what he does. And, I think of some of the movies that have come out recently that he's produced that doesn't relate in that way. It doesn't show that beginning or that arc in the end. And so I'm fearful that if that's it, coupled with this manosphere that we have going on right now that is propelling some of our young men to be a little bit, to some degree, very much so toxic in how they're in their engagement, without both, I'm not sure where we're going to end up.
Thanks for that. Hey, we need to pause for the call. So that is our time as a panel. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we're going to come back for the remainder. There's going to be an announcement for you guys. So thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, baby, you're my inspiration, and there's no hesitation when you want me. Honey, just call me. No, baby, you are my consolation, and I feel so much sensation when I'm in your arms. When you squeeze me, the way that you do. The way that you love me more. Oh yeah, the way that you do. The way that you love me. Oh, every sky would be blue as long as you're loving me, baby. Oh, when I hear wonderful, my love. Oh, give me pretty loving, baby. Give me pretty loving, honey. Keep on loving me, baby. Oh, you know I need you, honey. You know I need you, baby. Keep on loving me. Loving me the way you do. My love.
Yeah.
Please welcome Delano Squires, Research Fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Richard and Helen DeVos Center for Human Flourishing.
Oh boy, it looks like everybody's having a good time socializing, but if we can all take our seats. The third and final session is about to start. So if you all don't mind, we're going to have time to trade cards and talk and all right. Okay. Hey, what's up? Good to see you. I'm waiting for the cue from our team. Okay, so this is our third and final session. Just a quick housekeeping note. So after this session, I'm going to do a short presentation on some work that's connected to today, and then we will have a reception for you all to show our appreciation for you coming here, to continue these conversations, to exchange information, to cross-pollinate to see who's working on what project, because I really envision this event being not just about people talking about this issue, but people who were in this family and marriage space being able to trade notes and to learn from each other's work. So we're going to go right into the final session. So let me get my paperwork, and I'm really excited about this. So this session is called For the Culture. Can we make marriage before carriage the norm again? So what I'm going to do is bring up on stage Ian Rowe first. Ian Rowe is the co-founder of Vertex Partnership Academies, a virtues-based international baccalaureate high school in the Bronx. He's also a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Ian is the author of Agency, the 4-Point Plan, Free, for all children to overcome the victimhood narrative and discover their pathway to power. His Free initiative cultivates a deeper understanding of how family, religion, education, and entrepreneurship weave together a moral fabric that shapes and develops agency in children. So Ian, if you join me. Right under your picture. Okay. Right under your picture. Yeah. Next is Pastor John K. Jenkins Sr. Pastor Jenkins is the senior pastor of First Baptist Church in Glenarden in Prince George's County, Maryland, where he leads over 11,000 members. Is that about right, Pastor? I don't want to short you. Okay. FBCG has over 100 ministries, including for singles and married couples. Under his leadership, First Baptist has also founded Shabbat Ministries, a nonprofit that provides clothing, food, education, and other resources in the Washington, D.C. area. Pastor Jenkins is the author of the book, Grace to Grow. He and his wife, Trina, are the proud parents of 6 children and 7 grandchildren. Pastor Jenkins, if you come on up and join us.
That you stole a woman from my church.
So yes, quick point of privilege. When I met my wife, she was going to First Baptist Church in Glenarden, and I was going to a different church, and she came over to where we were. But I will say, we took the home builders class from the Tatums about 3 years into our marriage. So we came and we paid it back a little bit. So thank you, Pastor Jenkins, for being here. And last but certainly not least, Amisho Sho Baraka. Sho Baraka is a polymath. He spent the last 18 years traveling the world as a recording artist, consultant, speaker, and writer. Sho has 5 solo albums, 3 feature film appearances, and 1 book entitled He Saw That It Was Good. He's a co-founder of the AND Campaign and currently an editorial director at Christianity Today. Sho is presently launching a startup institute called Good Culture, a community galvanizing artists, academics, and advocates. Sho lives in Atlanta, Georgia with his wife Patrice, his wife of 22 years, and their 3 children. The couple have 2 boys on the autism spectrum and serve as advocates in the autism community. And I can say this before he comes up, I'm personally a fan of Sho Baraka's music. He's probably one of the first artists I started listening to when I got into Christian hip hop. So Sho, come on up and join us. My man. Appreciate you. All right, so we're going to get started with this conversation. And can you all hear me? Okay. So we're going to get started with this conversation, and let's start here.
This is a question to everyone. Are there any institutions in Black America today that consistently transmit the idea that a man and woman should be married before having children? Pastor Jenkins, I'm going to start with you, because I believe if we want to save the home, we have to get 4 houses in order: the church house, the schoolhouse, the state house, and the art house, which represent religion, education, government, and media. And I certainly believe the church house is the most important. So Pastor Jenkins, any institutions today that consistently send that message to young men and young women?
It is my prayer. I wish it was true in all areas. Unfortunately, it is not. But there are churches that I think has grabbed the handle of it, and they're promoting and they're doing it, and I'm proud that our church is one of them.
Absolutely. Ian?
Well, first of all, Delano, thank you for having us. It's obviously very important, and I'm so glad you started this morning with Bob Woodson, who several of us have said is our mentor and visionary here. My parents were married for 48 years before my dad passed away. And it's interesting when you listen to a lot of the commentaries of the panelists, the importance of the importance of the stability of their own parents, why this conversation is so central, because it is truly intergenerational. But when Bob talked about, when he was growing up, we had holes in our shoes, but we had 2 parents in the home, it's very profound, right? And what Bob is great at doing is always framing this idea that the conditions under which the Black community lives today is far superior than 100 years ago, right? All the legal barriers, all the mandated discrimination, all that has gone away, and yet our rates of marriage, our rates of births within marriage, all those are far superior today. So the question always for this entire conference is, if we were able to achieve that success under those conditions where we had legalized barriers, what is holding back our community today? So I think it's a really important premise. Can we make marriage the norm again? I think it's always important to add that word again, just to remind us it's not as if we're starting from scratch, as if we've never been in the territory of having healthy marriages and children within marriage. That's how we lived, and I mean, it's really extraordinary. A colleague of mine, Nike Fajors, put together some data, the Moynihan report that we're celebrating 60-year anniversary of. He lamented the fact that in 1965, the non-marital birth rate in the Black community was 23.6%, right? So that was a crisis then. We've looked, it's 70% now. But that meant that 75% of babies were being born within marriage. And if you look at what's called the ever married rate, so this is the percentage of women aged 40 to 44 that were ever married, right? So in 1950, in the white community, amongst white women, amongst all white women aged 40 to 44, 95% had been married. So effectively 100%. What would you guess the ever married rate for Black women was in 1950? Almost equal, 95%, right? So effectively 100%. In 1960, 95% amongst white women, 94% amongst Black women. So even as Moynihan was lamenting that the non-marital birth rate was 23.6%, again, predominantly amongst a rising generation of Black women whose attitudes were shifting, older Black women were still married. Even in 1970, more than 90% of Black women aged 40 to 44 ever married was 92%. It's now, as of 2020, only 55% of all Black women. So the generational shift was happening even when Moynihan was writing this report, lamenting non-marital birth rates increasing in the Black community. The vast majority of older Black women were married. So that generational shift was happening. So now to your question, back then, there were lots of messages reiterating general society, popular culture was sending the signal across all races that even if you're poor, even whatever other conditions may exist in your life, marriage, then children, was the pathway into young adulthood. And so my answer to your question is I don't believe there is any institution consistently across the board. There's some schools, and we'll talk about what we do in our school. But no, I think the general ethos right now seems to be to treat all types of families the same. So if you're married, no, it's okay if you're a single mom. One of the panelists said earlier, one of her colleagues, one of her female friends said, I'm going to have a baby on my own because that's what works for me. And that's celebrated in the same way that a marriage might be celebrated. It's almost like because we don't want to stigmatize single parenthood. So I think there's almost, not only is there not a message of saying marriage, then children, I think there's a message of it kind of doesn't matter, whatever works for you, because it's about you, not necessarily about the baby that you're bringing into the world.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll just say in short, most of the context in which I operate, which is mostly black traditional churches or multi-ethnic churches that are led by black pastors, I will say promote the idea of family and being married before the carriage, as you will. But apart from that, I would say, nah, I don't think there's, definitely not in my industry, which is music.
Yeah. The way I put it is this, not even generations ago, even when I was a kid, what you would hear in the schoolyard, kids would say, Chris and Christina sitting in the tree, Kissing. Mm-hmm. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in the baby carriage.
The first rap. What?
Right. But the script today is different. The script today is Chris and Christina staring at their screens, Texting. First comes sex, then comes baby, then comes marriage, but that's a big maybe, right? So that family formation life script has changed, even in the course of my generation. So since you all...
And it's important to note, across race.
Correct.
Is not,
correct.
It's not no longer a quote-unquote pathology in the black
correct.
community.
Which I would hope would give us a little bit more space to talk about it. But I'll say this, since you all know that I proved that I could rap a little bit, Cheryl, I'm going to come back to you. As an artist and a student of hip-hop, what role do you think mainstream rap, particularly the lyrics and the imagery, let's say from 1990 on, has played in how black men and black women see one another, the relationships between one another, and the extent to which we strive for or aspire to the institution of marriage?
Huge, quite detrimental. But I also think, as Brother Ian communicated, although it's very important to understand how hip hop was birthed and where it was birthed out of. It's an industry that was birthed out of the projects of New York, and so you have drug epidemic, you have a housing crisis, you have a lot of things that are impacting these individuals that are out of their control, and so they are trying their best to make sense of the world in which they're living, and so out comes this beautiful poetic music. But these folks are really just expressing their worldview, like their experiences. The problem is that I don't think, and it's just my own opinion, that experience shouldn't necessarily become an ideology or a doctrine. And because it's become a doctrine within hip hop, you have folks who did not experience that or don't experience that. Folks like myself growing up in a very nice home, listening to gangster rap, coming outside thinking like, yo, anybody can get it right now. You know what I'm saying? And so, therefore, I do think there becomes a problem where we take on ideas that we don't necessarily experience. And so one of the beautiful things in the industry in which I've decided to do is, it's easy for me to come in and just berate individuals for communicating. And yes, I do think a large part of story formation and story building is destroying bad stories. Combating bad stories, but also destroying. But the other part is telling better stories. Yeah. And I think a lot of us have forgotten how to tell a better story. God tells one of the greatest stories of all time. He says, "You are created in my image," and people were content with that. His creation was content. Then Satan comes by and he tells a story, which he thought was a better story. Now, you can be who you want to be, but then God comes with a greater story and says, "I'm giving my son in order to bring a redemption, not only with us, but how you create and how you." And I think we have a responsibility to not just point out the negativity, but to say, man, what is a better story? And so one of the things that we do is, as you said, you've been a fan of my music, one of the things that I and a lot of my contemporaries have done is to write songs about marriage, to make it look beautiful, not to just, I love R&B music, I love slow music, but oftentimes when Christians have tried to make art, it sounds very terrible. It's just like, I love my wife and I love Jesus. You know what I'm saying? And I love my wife because Jesus loved me first. And it's like, all right, that's a fact, but can we just put a little bit of flavor to that? And so that's what my goal is and to not just bring soul conviction, but to also bring compassion as well. And that's why I thought it's important to understand the impetus which created hip hop is pain and struggle. So how do I show compassion to these folks while at the same time saying, hey, we go and sin no more? You know what I'm saying? Right. So this is the environment in which we move.
And what I find interesting about that, there was a lot of pain and struggle at the turn of the last century as well in the black community, right? Like jazz, these are art forms that also emerged out of pain and suffering.
And pastors thought jazz was deplorable. Like they used to, I remember, W.E.B. Du Bois would talk about how there was a raunchy music. And who today would think jazz is a raunchy?
Right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. But the point is, at what point did the artistic expression of pain and suffering go from beautiful, maybe considered raunchy at the time, but certainly not as misogynistic and all the messages we have today?
Yeah. So let me ask this question to you, Pastor Jenkins, right? And we're definitely gonna come back to the media piece, because again, I want to hit all the houses. We're gonna hit the church house, we're gonna hit the schoolhouse, right? We're gonna hit the state house, and certainly again come back to the art house. But as I mentioned in my intro, my wife and I took a class at First Baptist with William and Carolyn Tatum many years ago, home builders. Why is it important for First Baptist to offer those classes to members and the larger community? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we train children and train people who are prepared and talking about getting married, about the responsibilities of when you get married. So a lot of marriages don't survive because people don't understand the commitment. Marriage is not a contract, it's a covenant. Right. And there's a big difference between the two. Yeah. And a lot of our children and kids growing up don't understand that. My wife and I just celebrated 45 years of being married. 45 years. Yeah. I know what you want to say. Go ahead, lean over to your neighbors. He looks so young. Go ahead and tell him. But we're together. I wish I could say we're still together today because I've been such a great husband, but that would be far from the truth. She tried to leave me one time, and she went in the closet crying. I don't know what I did. And she started packing her clothes, and I didn't know what to do. I went in the closet behind her, broke out my suitcase, said, I'm going with you. I'm sick and tired of this. But we're still together today because we made a commitment that divorce would not be an option. Amen. That we would not consider divorce. So we would work through. And that's what the whole essence of what family is, teaching you how to deal with other people, teaching you how to accept other people who might, you learn these values in your family. Yeah. And that's what our marriage ministry tries to do, is to train couples how they can survive, and hopefully they can pass those values down to their children, so that when they have to deal with others, that they recognize what it takes to deal with somebody who doesn't think like you, act like you, how to resolve conflict, all of that. So we feel, matter of fact, our marriage preparation is about 20 weeks. You got to take two classes. You took a submarital class. We teach 20 weeks of 2 classes, 10 weeks each. before you get married.
Wow.
To try to help you understand what the responsibilities are in marriage. And a lot of people are not getting that training and that education. And I feel it's critical. Matter of fact, you cannot get married in our church if you don't take those 2 classes.
Wow. So let me say this, and I'm going to clap for that. I'm going to marry 2 houses together for a quick second, right? So oftentimes people will ask, okay, what role should the state, should the government play in terms of creating a culture of marriage? Because that's what I'm talking about. The last panel was about individual relationships. This panel is about how institutions can help seed and feed a culture of marriage. The federal government has earmarked close to $100 million for marriage, family strengthening, fatherhood programs. I'm interested, Pastor Jenkins, would First Baptist take advantage, like, would you all apply for something like that? And then if you did, would you be willing to, let's say, offer classes in low-income neighborhoods, whether in PG County, whether in DC, and like, would that be something you would be open to? And what would that look like from your perspective?
So first of all, we're doing classes right now without the grants.
Okay.
So if you're going to give us some money to do it, praise the Lord. But I think it's important to say, if that money comes with some restrictions tied to it, we would not take that money.
Understood.
The core of what we're teaching has to deal with building a personal relationship with Christ. And so if this money is saying we can't promote that or we can't share that, then we would not be willing to take that kind of money.
Gotcha. Ian, let me ask you a question, sort of lean on your expertise, right? Can you talk to us a little bit, 1, about the success sequence, and then 2, how you are, in your way, working with, at first, younger students and now high school students, sort of spreading some of those seeds so that even as they think about being scholars, they may also think about, at one point in their life, being spouses. Can you talk about the success sequence and how your schools are introducing students to those concepts at an early age?
Certainly, and the concept of the success sequence, again, it actually comes from the type of thinking that Bob Woodson often talks about, which is that if there's 70% of the population that's not being successful through non-marital births, that there must be another population that's doing well. What is it that that population is doing that has defined their success, and is there anything common about those behaviors? So a lot of data analysts many years before me at the Brookings Institution started to analyze for that segment of not just the Black community, but of Americans that were successful, what were the common behaviors? And it was discovered that if a young person completes at least a high school degree, so not necessarily even college, but just a high school degree, then a full-time job of any kind, so you learn the dignity and discipline of work, and then if you have children, marriage first, that series of decisions, education, work, marriage, then children, people who follow that series of decisions, data shows 97% of the time, avoid poverty. And the vast majority of people who do that enter the middle class or beyond, right? So, and that formulation has now become called the success sequence. And there's some people who resist the success sequence. They say, well, you're being fatalistic. I mean, lots of people didn't follow the success sequence and they were successful. That is true. There are always exceptions of people who go in a different order and they figure it out, and there are people that follow the success sequence and they're not always successful. And it's not as if you can't recover from it, right? So if you, let's say you did have a child, there's always a way to get back on a path. But the data is still overwhelming. And for us, we believe young people, especially in communities where they're not seeing many models of people who follow the success sequence. Where I run schools in the Bronx, the non-marital birth share is 86%, right? So nearly 9 in 10 babies that are born in this part of the Bronx are born outside of marriage, right? So most of the kids in our school are in families whose parents did not make these decisions. Some people tell us that's why you shouldn't teach this, because you'll be embarrassing these kids, you'll be making them feel bad in some way, and we say exactly the opposite. We actually think it's very empowering to let young people know that these are the decisions within your control, right? That you have the ability to execute within your life. And so that for us is, it moves away from the structural barrier, all the reasons people say you can't, when in fact, there's a large population of black people that are doing great, right? The poverty rate amongst married black couples has been in the single digits for at least 30 years in terms of measuring economic outcomes. Why would we deprive young people of that information? Focus on your strengths. That's what Bob Woodson earlier said today. Let's focus on that segment of the black community that's doing extremely well. That is as accessible to everyone, when oftentimes we seem to be so focused on the pathology of what is going wrong.
And one of the things that I remember back in 2013, Mayor Michael Bloomberg in New York City ran a teen pregnancy ad campaign. And some of the ads said, so the campaign used images of toddlers that were like talking to their parents. And one of them said, "Honestly, Mom, chances are he won't stay with you. What happens to me?" And these were considered extremely controversial at the time. His administration took a lot of heat. But one of the ads actually said, if you finish school, get a job, get married, then have children, your chances of avoiding poverty are 98%. Yes. So they didn't even say the success sequence, but they were communicating that message. And again, as the State House,
he was attacked.
He was attacked.
He was attacked for you're making all the teenagers in low-income communities feel bad about themselves. It was one of the most unsuccessful elements of Bloomberg's tenure as mayor.
So I want to push into that a little bit, because I do think that there's this notion that if we promote sort of the married, two-parent, husband, wife, traditional, natural family structure, however you want to call it, nuclear family, whatever you want to call it, that it is going to make families, particularly, let's say, single moms with kids, feel shame, feel stigma. Can you all, talk about that a little bit? Show. I'll start with you. Do you think it's true that promoting an ideal necessarily stigmatizes those that don't meet it? And if so, is this an issue that's worth sort of pushing past that discomfort?
Yeah, so it's definitely necessary, and it's something that we should do. I think I love, and once again, just landing on storytelling and telling stories. If I can critique our politics for just a second, one of the things that I recognize is that if I were to listen to stories on the left, what happens is there's an overemphasis on individuality. There's an idolatry around identity that is promoted, and we know how that damages people. On the other side, on the right, I think what we have is an overemphasis of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, or a lack of compassion. And I think the beautiful thing is, how do we tell stories that get to the truth, that tells this success narrative sequence, while at the same time understanding some of the conditions that probably created these particular situations. And so the moment I come into the room and I say, hey, I understand the conditions in which are impacting you, but we got to figure out how to get out of this.
Yeah.
I think that builds so much kind of equity with individuals. And I've noticed even somewhat of a subterfuge that happens within the music industry. And I can't remember what summer it was, but there was this summer where I guess they called it like the hot girl summer. And you had artists, there were prominent artists, very prominent female black artists, who would promote this idea of hot girl summer. And the idea of hot girl summer is just live your life, sis. Live your life, queen. Every single one of these artists were married.
Mm-hmm.
And so they understand what it means to be successful. But the narratives they're pushing is beneficial for sales.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we have to do is get out of just promoting what we think sells, but what is true, what is noble, what is honorable, what is just. Yeah. And if it doesn't sell, oh well. But we got to learn how to just embrace telling better stories while being compassionate and understanding truth.
And
go ahead, Ian.
And I'll tell one very quick story. Because when we started teaching the success sequence in our schools in New York in 8th grade, we got a huge amount of pushback. Don't do this, stay in your lane. School is for reading, writing, arithmetic. Why are you talking about things like marriage in school? And so we were really questioning ourselves, like, are we doing the right thing here? And we were thinking about a high school at that time, so I was touring, looking at other great high schools across the country. So I was in New Orleans, visiting a 9th grade class in this premier high school made up of primarily Black, Hispanic, and Asian kids in a very low-income community. And I posed this question to these 9th graders, just like here. So imagine you're all 14, 15 years old, and some strange guy walks in and says, pose this question to you. If you knew that there were a series of decisions in your control that when young people just like you followed that series of decisions, 97% avoided poverty and the vast majority entered the middle class or beyond. Would you want to know what those decisions are? And as you might imagine, this group of 14, 15-year-olds said, well, yeah, of course. Why? Of course I'd want to know. Why wouldn't you tell me? Then I said, well, there's some grown-ups that think that I shouldn't tell you, that you can't handle the information, that somehow you'll be embarrassed or that I'll be shaming you in some way. So you know what? I'm not going to tell you. But hold on. But what these students looked at me and they said, are you crazy? Wait, you can't tease with that and then not let us know. You tell us and then we can decide whether or not that information is useful to us or not. And it was just a really great revelation for me because it's such a great example of what gatekeepers do.
Yes, yes.
Right? It's the gatekeepers. No, you can't tell that to these kids. No, you stick to your lane. So anyway, we had what in my view was a very productive conversation in what I call a descriptive fashion, not prescriptive. Yeah. I didn't say you must follow these steps in order to be successful. What I did say is data shows that decisions in this order typically lead to these economic outcomes. Decisions in this order, a different order, lead to far worse economic outcomes, right? But you're going to be the decision maker in your life. And so at the end, I just felt like they felt respected as future decision makers in their own life. So storytelling is absolutely important, but we have to find ways to frame this content so it's empowering, not embarrassing, right? And that we don't allow gatekeepers to stop us from avoiding telling young people about decisions that they're following in their own lives, and yet somehow feel it's inappropriate to share with kids.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic point. I think one of my frustrations oftentimes with leaders in our community is that they live right and talk left. As we've said, Ian, the Who's Your Daddy DNA truck does not drive around the Hamptons. It doesn't drive around Martha's Vineyard or Napa Valley. So they will either promote or defend ideas for the masses that they don't practice with the classes. And that is a frustration. Pastor Jenkins, I want to come to you because I raised the issue of stigma and shame. And it's my contention that shame in its proper proportion does play a role, a prophylactic role in governing human behavior. Certain things you say when you're younger, you say, I don't want to do certain things. I don't want to bring shame to my family. But I think the church has a unique role to play when dealing with people who may feel shame for decisions that they've already made. Can you talk to the role as a minister that the church should play in that perspective so that if a mom does have kids out of wedlock or if a dad does have kids out of wedlock, he feels that the church is a place where he can still come to learn, to grow, and to promote a family ideal that his children may be able to benefit from?
So I've been the pastor of First Baptist Church of Grenada for 36 years. For the past 30 years, I cannot remember a Sunday. We have 3 services on Sunday right now. I cannot remember a Sunday where nobody came forward to accept Jesus. And the reason for that is we do have people in there that have failed, that have made mistakes. The message that the church has to promote and share is that no matter what you've done in your past, we serve a God who will forgive you of whatever you have done. And that's the message we preach every Sunday, is whatever we're teaching, whatever we're saying, if it's about marriage, if it's about, it doesn't matter what it's about. At the conclusion of that message, I say every Sunday, or in the words of my kids, every Sunday, you can be forgiven for what you've done. And that's the message that we have to promote and share. That is, I don't hear it very often. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to get pastors to be more proactive in telling people that regardless of what your story has been, what your parents' story has been, what your failures have been, we serve a God who will forgive you and restore you and help you become everything that God destined for you to be in your life.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit about the schoolhouse, but not K through 12. So I want to mention the work, for instance, that Hampton University is and has been doing. Hampton has had a national conference on the Black family, I want to say every year since 1982. So I've had the pleasure of speaking there for the last couple of years. I think their leader, they opened their National Center for Black Family Life a couple years ago. And I'd like to hear you all, particularly starting with you, Ian, talk about the role HBCUs as educational institutions, but also as forming institutions for scholars. Because the ring by spring culture that I know exists, because all of the interns here at Heritage, every intern class has had at least one person either engaged or married by the time they leave. I don't feel like there's that same ring by spring culture on HBCUs. I'd love to hear, I know you all may not be experts in that area. Sure, you are. But I'd love to hear you talk about whether that culture can take root and what role we can play in sort of spreading those seeds there.
Well, I truthfully, I think the courage that's required at K to 12 to talk about these things, to teach things like the success sequence, it's the same courage that needs to exist leaders of HBCUs or just leaders of colleges, period. I actually don't really draw that heavy a distinction. This is just not on the agenda for most institutions of higher education. Again, primarily because we've now moved to this mode with the social norm is not marriage. It's much more a message of be independent, do your own thing, which is not necessarily because one of the steps on the success sequence, right, is complete your education, right? Complete your education, and if you can get a college degree in a meaningful degree, even better, and then get a full-time job, then marriage, then children. So it's just that the path into young adulthood, where it used to be that marriage was seen as what's called a cornerstone, sort of a step along the way for your journey, has now become what's called a capstone, meaning that you can do all this other stuff in your life, but marriage, oh my God, that I'll have a kid before I'm ready for marriage, where that used to be completely verboten. You could never do that. But this idea, so I do think schools of higher education have a role to play. But for so many of these things, it just takes courage on the part of leadership to say we're going to talk about these things as the norm for which we want young people to aspire, without demonizing people who may have made different decisions, right?
So Sho, let me come to you, because you mentioned earlier when we were talking, you went to Tuskegee, right?
TU? Was that the first time TU was shouted in the Heritage Foundation?
Might be, but we've done conferences on HBCUs before, and I think we got some TSU alum in here, some Hampton. Okay, so you're not alone. Let me ask this. If you can think back to when you were on campus, you might not have been counting, but give me a sense of what the male-female sort of ratio was, because I saw a story.
I can tell you how many females were there.
because I saw a story that 19%, if I have the numbers right, of Howard University undergrads are black males. So while I think that HBCUs can play a role, particularly in promoting a culture of marriage, if the gender balance is that far tilted, it may be difficult. So can you talk a little bit about what you remember, to the extent you feel comfortable, what you remember being at Tuskegee and how HBCUs can play that role today?
So I'm gonna tell a story on how I got there. So I grew up in a very black radical household. My mom was a part of the Black Panther Party, and so my name is Amisho Baraka, not because my parents are from Kenya or Uganda. They from Los Angeles, and they were like, "Yo, you ain't gonna have no slave names." So I grew up in this kind of black radical tradition, and then when I got to Tuskegee, and that was one of the reasons why I went to Tuskegee, is I want to go to a HBCU. I became a Christian on campus, and that blew my whole framework up, because my whole idea was like Christianity was a white man's religion. It's, you know, it's used to oppress black people. And I was like, what do I do with this blackness, but what do I also do with this Christianity that has been, and then I realized, oh, they weren't in conflict with one another. Being on that campus, I learned a few things. I learned that about Christianity's history in Africa and extra, and, you know, and then George Washington Carver has a museum there, and I think it's a grave, just it's intellectual and incompetence that we don't talk about the faith of some of these individuals like Washington, like Douglass, like Wheatley. But then I also learned about Christian history, especially black Christian history. And so I got introduced to Lemuel Haynes, and the AME Church, Richard Allen, Absalom Jones. And so that kind of helped me. But I got introduced to those people through campus ministries and pastors. And so the reason why I'm bringing those up is because we need some of the brightest individuals who want to change culture to orbit around these spaces.
Yes.
So if you have a passion to reach youth, like, how are you going to be there? Like, I've always grown frustrated with great intellectuals who talk about black this, black that, black this, and I'm like, well, why don't you work at a HBC? Oh, well, they don't pay me enough, doc. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, okay, so. I think in some ways we need churches to be very intentional on these campuses, because I got discipled by a black man on this campus who didn't go to Tuskegee, but he had a heart for black students, and he would invite me to his house, and I would come. And the first time he invited me to his house, he said, "Come any day you want to have dinner with my family." And I was like, this brother lying. And so I tested him. I said, I'm gonna come. And he kept inviting me. And he had a beautiful family. And although I grew up in a great household, my parents were divorced by this time. But I got to see, and they weren't Christian at that point either, but I got to see what a Christian marriage looked like. And that was such a great indelible impact for me. And so now I went forth a couple years later, while I was still a student, got married myself, as you kind of talk about this ring by spring thing. Yeah. And the reason why is because we both were discipled or in a context where marriage was made much of. And we didn't have to see this as something that only white people did. You know what I'm saying? Or people outside, like we all had the image of the Cosby shows and rock and different shows that we loved. But that wasn't a normalized picture outside of the context of that entertainment. You know what I'm saying? And so I think we got to be around these campuses. We got to show individuals in these institutions, what does it look like to love thy spouse with all their heart, mind, body, and soul?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Pastor Jenkins, before we go to the last word for everybody, I wanted to ask you a particular question, because Sho talked about getting married relatively earlier than what most people would tell you. At First Baptist Church Glenarden, right? You can answer for your church and what you know about church culture, generally speaking. Are young people getting the message that it's okay to get married before they have 2 degrees, own 4 houses, have traveled the world, made partners 6 times over, and at the ripe old age of 45, now you're saying, I'm ready to settle down, right? Do they get the message that marrying before accomplishing everything that you want in life, right? The capstone model. Do they get the message that marrying before, because Ian mentioned the cornerstone model, that's marrying young, building a life together. The capstone model of marriage is marrying after you've done all these, met these professional and personal goals. So do young people get the message that it's okay to marry, like how their parents and grandparents did, at 24, 25, 23? Or are they getting a different message that marriage should come after they do all of the professional stuff?
I hate to give you this answer.
Uh-oh.
their decision on marriage has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do on the images that they've seen in front of them of marriages not surviving. A lot of their parents didn't survive. Some of their friends who got married young didn't survive. Their marriages didn't survive. And so we have a poor image that has been paraded before young people, and they're fearful and afraid to enter into marriage because they haven't seen very many of them work.
Wow.
Can I also mention, I won't say necessarily the elephant in the room, but this is the first generation that has grown up where pornography is ubiquitous. And it's so easily accessible. And so you think about the standards that you have to compete against when they can easily just grab something and be inundated with these images and these ideas that those appetites won't be satiated in a way in real life. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed as well. And when you talk to young men, almost every single one of them, they're struggling with pornography.
Wow.
And I think part of manhood, part of developing men is getting them out of that, getting them away from that. And that takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of, but also, yeah.
I once heard a pastor say that when you begin to consume pornography, particularly if he was talking to a man, it trains you to not be satisfied with one woman, a real woman, or your woman. And I think that's one of the issues. And to your point, there was a period of time where you had to go looking for it. But now it's ubiquitous, and even to the extent where you may get on social media, and you're not even looking for that, and you'll see images, right, that may sort of lure you in and trap you in. So I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. I want each of you all to take a minute or two and give your sort of final take on the role you feel institutions can play in creating a culture of marriage and intact families. Ian, I'm going to start with you and show you, and then Pastor Jenkins, I'll let you bring it home.
Okay, I'll actually start with the State House, because I think one of the most frustrating things for policymakers in this area is that policy only has so much reach.
Right.
When you're talking about very intimate decisions, like am I going to get married to someone or having babies within marriage? So there are all sorts of policy discussions around, should you have incentives for numbers of babies? And I think in Hungary, if you have 4 kids, you have no income tax for life. And so there are all these, and it's not yet clear. So I have a much simpler, hopefully catalytic idea for how policy can make a difference. So in my world of education, every couple of years there's something called the nation's report card, where the 12th grade numbers just came out. When you see the data, you almost always see, once again, United States kids are not reading at grade level, and there's the headline, and then there's immediately the discussion of the disparities. The difference between black kids and white kids, rich kids and poor kids, boys and girls. And what's interesting, you never see disparities reported by family structure. Right? You never see the difference between, and by the way, the differences are huge. And in fact, once you see data disaggregated by family structure, you see that it's a transcendent factor, meaning that there are black kids being raised in married 2-parent households that are doing better, that generally, than white kids raised in single-parent households, right? And so one of the simplest things the federal government can do, and state houses, is to start disaggregating student achievement information in education, healthcare, crime, almost every area, disaggregated by a standard set of family structure categories. It sounds very mundane, but in my view, it would change everything, because it would force every analyst to realize that what I call the usual suspects of race, class, gender, as because the typical deal is if you see a disparity by race, well, that must be caused by racism, as opposed to the differences in family structure across race, right? So that would be and something we're working on very much, hopefully with this administration right now.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, I think the entertainment world, specifically also music, has done a wonderful job of creating opportunity for black families or black entertainers, and creating financial capabilities that probably weren't possible. However, adversely, I think it's in a lot of ways, not all. In a lot of ways, some of these people are also creating morally bankrupt individuals through the communication that I think is detrimental. And part of that is because the industry of music benefits from the derogatory messages, and the prison industrial complex benefits from us telling men to be violent and rageful. And I think what we need is a gospel that, and I think about Jesus when he approaches the man at the pool of Bethesda. He says, "Do you want to be healed?" And that sounds like a ridiculous question. But you do have to ask some people, do you want to be healed? Because you've probably lived all your life in this particular condition, and it's just comfortable for you, and you know no other way to live. But I promise you, there's something much greater than this. There's something much, it's more beautiful, there's more flourishing. You just have to have faith and trust that it can happen. And I think the church is in a wonderful position to be able to be that agent to communicate that message of truth and grace.
Thank you. Pastor Jenkins?
Let me thank you for having me. I'm just honored to be here.
Absolutely.
And to sit between these two gentlemen here today. I'm honored, grateful. I am hopeful, in spite of what the numbers say. I am hopeful. I'm proud of our church. I think our church is a model to other churches, because in every area that you mentioned, from pornography to education to all of these things, our church has ministries that are actively involved with developing and training people on how to succeed in life and how to honor the Lord by applying those principles in their life.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that about our church, and I wish more churches did it. We have a school. We need to learn, talk to you and find out, get you to come down and help us out a little bit. Get this young man to come and do some of his rap.
I can do a little bit right now.
But it's the common message that your marriage can survive.
Yes.
You can make it. You can build a strong family. We're teaching the couples in our church how to resolve conflict, how to get through these difficult days and times in marriage, because you are going to have difficulties in marriage. It's just a part of the journey. But teach them how to overcome that and how to solve it. So I can only speak for the church. That's my area of expertise. I can't speak for education or all the other government and all that. I can't speak for them. I can say that God has given us the word, and it is through the word of God that if we teach it and proclaim it and help people apply it to their life, they can overcome and they can make it.
Amen. Amen. So we have about 9 minutes, about 10 minutes for Q&A. Any questions? So if you have questions, there's a microphone in the back. You can just go straight to the microphone. It's okay. Because if you let an artist, a pastor, and a teacher get the mic again, they're not going to give it back. So, questions?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. What are some ways in which you implement within your own families some of the things you talked about here today?
Are we bashful now?
There were certain things my daughter and kids were not allowed to watch. And then it was somebody, it may have been upstairs, I don't remember. But so not only did we restrict certain things, when my daughter became a teenager and I realized I just can't police her intake the way that I said, hey, let's at least just talk about it, because I want you to build the muscles of discernment so that you know how to properly engage this art in a way that I think will be helpful for you. So those are, to me, that's the way that I implement it with my kids.
Yeah, and I would say the most important thing we do, my wife and I, is that we try to model for our two children. The most important thing I think a father can do is to first love your spouse.
Amen.
You know, and vice versa. And sometimes we're looking for lots of complex answers and lots of complex. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that. Modeling. God, I teach my church and I teach my kids. God had to teach me how to love my wife. I had to learn how to listen to her. I wish the brothers would say amen and hear what they were saying. I know they want to, but their wife might be sitting next to them. I had to learn how to listen to her, be compassionate. And I had to learn how to, when she wanted to, I used to tell my wife when she would tell me stuff that bothered her, I used to say, that's the devil talking to you. But God had to teach me. 1 Peter 3:7 says you have to dwell with her according to knowledge. So that your prayers will not be hindered. And so I had to learn how to say, what? Yes, and just engage her. I had to learn to do some of the things that she liked to do. I had to learn to go shopping with her. I had to learn to watch the Home and Gardening channel with her. And now I like the Home and Garden channel more than she liked the Home and Garden channel. I had to engage in her world instead of her always, I'm a pilot, by the way. When I first got my license, the day I got my pilot's license, she came and got in the plane with me and flew with me. Now, if she could do that for me, I can go and watch the Home and Garden channel with her. There you go. So, and go shopping with her. So I had to learn that. And so I try to model that, try to teach that to my boys, my sons, to teach them to engage in your wives' worlds and be interested in what they're interested in. It's not all about you. So the answer to your question is I tried to model it.
Can I also add that one of the things that my wife and I have always tried to do is our marriage is not just for our home, it's for our community as well. So we try to be missional in our community. So we would host on Halloween like events. As much as possible, how can we be visible to our community so that even if these youngsters don't see it, not even just youngsters, adults in general, if people don't see a healthy marriage the way that we saw it when we were in college, that they can see us and all our frailty and all our sin, but yet hoping to be reconciled as before the sun sets on our wrath, as someone communicated earlier. And so allow your marriage to be missional minded.
Yeah. And I actually, on a related point, when our kids, because our children are 14 and 16, unfortunately, they're now friends with some couples that are having marital issues and considering divorce. And when they're talking about that, we tell our kids that's not going to happen with us. It's actually very profound.
Yeah. Is there another question?
Hi, everyone. So I am I'm a counselor and I work for a church. And what I've noticed within my clients is that there is a repeated behavior of or just unhealthy behaviors that are repeated. And I know we were talking about shame. And so my question is, and I find myself kind of frustrated in the church sometimes with this, is there is a message which we are all thankful for, I'm assuming, that we do have forgiveness through the glory of God, right? But should we merge two messages, which is accountability as well? I feel like there's a lack of accountability and then there ends up being this repeated behavior because we address the shame, but we don't address the actual action. So do you think those should be merged?
Yeah, let me jump in here on this thing. So while you were talking, before you said the word, I said the answer to her question is accountability. In our church, we have a lot of classes, but we also have discipleship groups. And the difference between a class where you are given information and a discipleship group, in the discipleship group, you are held accountable for what you've learned, of whether or not you've applied it into your life, whether you're doing what it is you've been taught. That's a big word, a big bird word in our church that we try to teach people. You have to have accountability partners in your life, people to hold you accountable, challenge you when you don't do what you've been taught. And so that's a part of what we do. Yes, you can be forgiven, but you have to be accountable, not to make it a regular practice in your life. That's what gives our ministries such strength today. People are held accountable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
By the way, when Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee, famous family that was married for 50 plus years, they asked him what was the secret to their longevity. He said the last words after every argument, "Yes, dear."
Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to, thank you, gentlemen. This was a really, really great conversation. Would you all give them a round of applause? And then I'm the last man standing between you and the reception, so I promise to keep this brief. But for some of you who know me, you know this is an issue that I talk about a great deal. I'm on the live or the mic? Okay, this is an issue I talk about a great deal. So in addition to this event, I wanted to do a quick preview of a report that I've written called Moving Beyond Moynihan, a new blueprint to revive marriage and rebuild the black family. So a short presentation, a few words, and then we can all eat, get some libations, communicate, network, and do all that good stuff. So let's see. So does everyone have a handout? Like the little palm card had a QR code in the back? Yes. So on the back of that handout is a QR code. If you scan that, it will take you to this page, heritage.org/black-family-blueprint. So my contention is that you cannot have a strong, thriving nation without strong communities. You cannot have strong communities without strong families, and you cannot have strong families without strong marriages. So this is a short commentary page, about 2,000 words. I'm just going to do a quick presentation and then tell you a little bit about the report, and then we're going to get out of here. So quick overview, Moynihan report. That link at the bottom is to the report that I wrote that was published early this morning, actually. And one of the things that I want to do, this is something that I'm actually did for my book. It's 4 eras of black family life in America. So I thought about sort of the genesis of the black family, how we think about the black family as an institution in and of itself, with its own sort of personality and history and trajectory. And I broke it up into 4 eras. The subjugation era, where the institution of marriage existed under the institution of chattel slavery. So that's 1619 through 1863, right? 1863, Emancipation Proclamation signed. You start to see formerly enslaved people, men and women, beginning to put their families back together again. There's actually a project called Last Seen that digitized ads from across the country where men and women were saying, I last saw my wife, Norma Ann, on the Richardson Plantation in Louisiana. I'm now in Texas. If you see her, send her to me. Let her know I'm looking for her. So you have the subjugation era where the institution of marriage and the institution of slavery were completely incompatible. You have the stability era, beginning, again, with the Reconstruction era, where families started to put themselves back together again. So, yes, families separated, putting themselves back together again. From 1890 to 1950, black men and women married at younger ages and were more likely to be married at the age of 35 than their white counterparts. 1963, second wave feminist movement begins, right? A lot of stuff happening in the 60s that affected the family. Second wave feminist movement begins, expansion of the welfare state begins. That leads to what I call the subversion era, where these two things created a shock to the home, generally speaking, but most acute in the black family for some of the reasons that Bob Woodson was talking about earlier. Welfare displaced men from their position as providers in their home. The second wave feminist movement encouraged women to rethink their relationship to themselves, to their own bodies, to men, to marriage, to children, and to the home itself. I call that subversion era. And what you see, spending on public aid programs increased from $3.6 billion in 1965 to over $62 billion by 1985, right? So again, you have the government, Uncle Sam, playing the role of husband and father in millions of homes over the course of, a few short decades. 1996 comes. President Clinton signs welfare reform into law. I call this the submission era. I say it's the submission era because we have accepted the marriage and father optional household structure as the default in the black community. Institutions don't challenge it. We talked about that in the last panel. I read an essay in the Washington Post several years ago where a woman who was doing some teaching in Southeast DC asked the kids what they want to do when they grow up. And some of the boys said that they want to be a father. And she said, "That's great. I'm going to bring in some couples to talk to you." And they said, "Well, hold on. We said we want to be a father. We didn't say anything about marriage." And one of the young men said, "Marriage is for white people." How did he get to that point? One, because the non-marital birth rate in Ward 8, where she was, is 81%. So there are young people who have not seen a man and woman living together as husband and wife for at least 3 generations. So when I say submission, I'm not talking about biblical submission. I'm talking about us allowing this to be the status quo without challenge almost anywhere in our culture. So that's where we are today. My contention, and you all saw that I titled this A Call for Action. My contention is that we need to start a new era, which is the revival era, where we make marriage revival and family reconstruction the #1 priority, particularly in the Black community, for at least the next 10 years. 10 years because that'll span several election cycles, because I think we need to get out of the notion that we're going to solve these issues through politics. A few charts. Black non-marital rate, poverty rate. So in 1959, poverty rate was 55%. The non-marital rate, non-marital birth rate in the Black community was 22%, right? What you see over the course of decades is that poverty plummets and the non-marital birth rate shoots up. I call this the poverty paradox, because a lot of times people will say that the issues we're talking about are ones caused by poverty. But again, as poverty declines, you start to see the non-marital birth rate go up, and it's been at or around 70% since the late 90s. So that relates to living arrangements for Black children. So in 1960, 67% of Black children were raised in 2-parent homes, about 20% in a single mother home, right? By the time we get to today, it's basically even. 45% in a 2-parent home. A little bit of that is cohabitation, but most of it is married couples. 44% in a single mother home. So my contention is that in many working class, low-income communities in DC, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Atlanta, New Orleans, Oakland, Cleveland, Detroit, New York, marriage has become obsolete and fathers have become optional in the home. So a lot of policymakers will be vexed and they say, we need to look at these certain structures and these institutions. And one of the things that I would say is that family inequality drives many of the issues around wealth and income. So what you see here, you have marriage rates, right, for adults in different communities paired with household income. And it's no shock to me, at least, that the order of marriage rates from highest to lowest mirrors the order of median household income, with Asians, then white, then Hispanic, then Black. But what you should know is that for Black married couples, their median household income is about $111,000. For Black married couples under the age of 65, add another $11,000 on there. Here's the problem. In terms of household composition, only 28% of Black households are headed by a married couple. So the reason you see some of these disparities is because, as I said, for Black married couples under 65, median income is about $120,000, but only 28% of Black households are led by a married couple, compared to almost 60% for Asians, 51% for whites, and 46% for Hispanics. And what happened to my clicker? Okay, hold on. Maybe if I go back and go forward. Can we roll forward to the next slide, please? See, this is the point where, okay, perfect. So what is the issue driving it? Ian sort of spoke to this in our previous panel, is the steep decline in marriage in the Black community over the last 60 years. I mean, there are neighborhoods you would go in where you're not able to find a family, a low-income family, working class family, who are raising kids together as a husband and wife. So this, to me, this disparity needs to be on the top of the mind of every self-professed black leader, civil rights institution, racial justice institution in the country. And the reason is this, and I'm gonna finish here. I'm gonna talk about the reason, a few points in terms of revival. Here are my recommendations. One, marriage revival and family reconstruction have to be priorities for black leaders. I say it that way because even though, again, we're talking about issues that transcend race, this is very much a race issue. It's a race issue because when you have prominent black academics saying that the two-parent family structure, married two-parent family structure, is a vestige of white supremacy, they're making it a race issue, right? So I'm not afraid of tackling it that way. Every time the NAACP or any other civil rights organization, I don't want to pick on them. No, I do want to pick on them. Actually, any civil rights organization that has a conference, I go and I look at the agenda. The Congressional Black Caucus is having a conference coming up in the next couple of weeks. I look at the agenda. Whatever issue you want to think about, it's on there. DEI, AI, CBC has a panel on oral health, so they're talking about brushing your teeth and flossing at night. Every issue, they never have one on marriage and family structure. If 70% of black children had some disease that only affected 30% of white kids, you can bet your bottom dollar that all those organizations will be putting resources into addressing that disparity. But for some reason, the people who talk about every institution are silent on the institution of marriage, and the people who talk about every structure are silent on the issue of family structure. So it has to be a priority. We have to reframe marriage strengthening efforts to talk about children. I'll say it this way. I believe children have a right to the affection, the protection, the correction, and direction of the man and woman who created them. And that right is best exercised in a loving, low conflict, stable, secure, two-parent home with married parents, right? So framing it around children means that what the adults want to do can no longer rule the day. We can't continue to put adult desires over children's rights. So priorities, reframing, harness the power of key institutions. That's the panel we just had, right? I look at marriage culture similar to agriculture. I'm a city boy. I'm from New York. But my parents grew up on the land. My grandparents grew up on the land. So you have to plant, water, and give light to the things that you want to grow. And you have to weed and prune the things that are threatening a bountiful harvest, right? So our institutions have to begin planting, dropping seeds. I'll tell you what it looks like. It can be an HBCU offering its grounds for marriages, for wedding receptions, right? So the marriage, the reception, and saying to the couple, all we want from you is the photos, because we want to run an on-campus awareness campaign saying, promoting Tuskegee Love, or Howard, or Fisk, or Hampton, or whatever university it is, right? It sounds like public officials, mayors, governors, saying, yes, we want to address all these important issues, but the most important institution in this city and in this state is the institution of the family. And none of our policy prescriptions will do anything unless we get that right? It's them running ad campaigns in the city. And I did this when I was with the city. It doesn't have to be as controversial as Mayor Bloomberg. It can say, in this town, we put marriage before carriage, or it can say, give her a ring before she gives you a baby. So we need to harness the power of key institutions. And the last thing, and to this point, I have not gotten myself in trouble, and I'm gonna try to retain that record, but we have to anticipate resistance from allies. And when I said this is a race issue, I'm gonna bring it back here. Let me describe what I'm talking about. There are groups that say they're allies of the black community who will oppose marriage revival and family restoration. Feminist groups will say that it wants to turn the clock of progress back on women, and it's about controlling, what women do with their bodies. Abortion advocates will say something similar because they understand that 87% of women who seek abortions are unmarried, and about 38% of all aborted babies in this country are black babies.
those disparities are even greater in the South. It's about 82% of babies in Mississippi who are aborted are black, right? So more marriage, more intact families are going to threaten that. So that's two groups. LGBT groups are going to say that the definition of marriage that has one man and one woman together for one lifetime is not sufficiently inclusive for the 21st century. And they'll say that their needs should be accommodated when it comes to the family. Functional atheists will say, well, I believe this for myself. I'm a Christian. I believe this for myself, but I don't want to impose my views on other people, right? And paternalists, big government liberals will say, the issue is not really family structure. It's about spending on government social programs. That's what we really need to do. And last but not least are going to be anti-racist activists who say the issue is not family structure. It's about toppling white supremacy and ending institutional racism. So these are the allies that we have to contend with. So last point, and I see I got a finger wave from Bob, and I'm gonna give you the mic real quick, Bob. Last point. As I said, I wrote this report, Moving Beyond Moynihan. It is up right now on heritage.org. You can get to it. You can get to this commentary page and to this report. Just scan the QR code that we gave you. And I want to say this really quick. This is a critically important issue. I've been thinking about this since I was about 15 years old in men's fellowship with my dad and my friends' dads in Brooklyn. And we were trying to figure out why our lives look so much different than the kids we grew up around. And we understood this because our parents had been married, now 40 plus years. We grew up in the church, and we had a community of men who surrounded us, working class guys, brick masons, and carpenters, and electricians. And none of the women talked about dating or marrying down, right? So this has been incubated. This has been stirring around in me for the better, well, I'm not gonna tell you how old I am, but since I was 15 years old, right? I am willing to take insults. I'm willing to get pushback, to be called bad names, to go into quote unquote enemy territory for the sake of the next generation. Because I do not want my children to have to fight this fight in their day. They could talk about something else, right? They could talk about whatever it is. I don't want what we were talking about in 1965, 1985, 2025 to be talking about in 2065. So I'm willing to lay it out all on the line for this issue, right? So I'll say that. And the last piece I'll say is this. Yes, this is an issue of policy and of culture, but ultimately the family is more than bits and bytes. It's more than just what you get when you get the right upstream policy inputs. I want every child to have the comfort to know that when they yell out, "Daddy," in the middle of the night, they're going to hear footsteps coming to comfort them. And right now, too many children in our community do not have that assurance. And I'm tired of the adults believing that if their feelings are getting hurt, that we should not do certain things for our kids because their feelings are going to be disrupted, right? We have to begin to put first things first, God first, and to labor for the institution that he created. So I'm gonna end there because I feel myself starting to get worked up. Can I have 1 minute for Bob? Bob, you want to say something?
30 seconds. Be of good cheer, because experience will always trump an argument, and a witness is more powerful than an advocate. We must equip the people suffering the problem to speak for themselves, and all your opposition will go away. If 1,000 low-income black folks say they agree with you, game's over.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Bob. So thank you all for coming. We have a reception outside. Please stay for a little while, right? We're gonna have some nice music playing. Get something to eat, get something to drink, have some conversation, and enjoy yourself. Thank you.